The Sword Emperor's brief appearance, it was undeniable that the Flame Emperor was powerful. He wasn't number 4 on the heaven rankings for nothing. However, his mental endurance was fairly ordinary. After all, the number of people who dared to curse at him could be counted on 2 hands. Moreover, he had never been mocked so relentlessly and viciously before. As a result, the Flame Emperor, who had rarely been insulted or mocked in his life, was angered to the point of fainting. When he woke up, there was no one around him. Winter of that year was long gone, as was everyone else. Only he remained in their original location. Song Yin crawled up, and the heaviness in his chest made him feel like coughing up blood. At this moment, his communication device rang, and as he answered it, he heard a crying voice. "Lord Flame Emperor, we were completely annihilated. That archer was too strong. He's an absolute monster. We were all killed. If you're still there, quickly come back." On the other side of the communication device, the leader of the mages was bawling his eyes out. They were killed too pitifully and shamefully. If their opponent was a monstrous expert like Ling Chen, and they were insta-killed, they would at most curse at him for a few minutes. However, that archer, he toyed with them to death. It was simply too despicable, too disgusting, too humiliating, too ruthless. He never wanted to see that archer ever again in his life. 100 high-leveled mages had all been killed? Song Yan's face darkened, and the hand that gripped the communication device went white. After their second profession upgrade, archers could become marksmen or hunters. Marksmen had powerful arrow attacks and movement abilities, and had the longest range. However, they lacked in melee fighting and fighting against crowds. Hunters' damage from their bows and arrows was inferior to marksmen, but could they summon a pet falcon to support them and attack? Their main abilities came in setting up powerful traps. Once activated, they could affect large groups of enemies, which was why they were effective against crowds. And yet a marksman, who lacked crowd fighting abilities, had completely annihilated a team of 100 mages. Song Yin was flabbergasted and felt the air within his lungs become cold. Who was this terrifying marksman that Song Yin was completely powerless against, and had destroyed 100 players single-handedly? Why didn't he know about such a powerful archer? He didn't even know his name. Did he have to return in shame again? Song Yin was reluctant to do so. He looked up and saw that in the distance there was a decently sized town. An idea sprang to his mind as he quickly walked over. Before, the archer had blocked his way, yelling that this was his territory. In that case, that town was probably one of his bases. After reaching it, he could find out which guild the archer belonged to. Not too long later, Song Yin came to the boundary of the town. The town was very similar to the countless other towns scattered across the Forgotten Continent. If he passed through the town, he would immediately be able to see the new city under construction. As such, to winter of that year in 100 miles of ice, they simply couldn't allow anyone to pass through the town. Song Yin didn't know about any of this. He simply wanted to know whether that terrifying archer had any comrades, and which guild he belonged to. He couldn't help admitting that he was no match for the archer, but there was no faction that the Yin Huang Alliance couldn't destroy. However, when he was less than 10 meters away from the entrance to the town, a gray shadow appeared before him. The gray shadow was simply too fast, and was not visible to the naked eye. The instant Song Yin saw that shadow, a cold aura arose less than 2 body spaces away from his throat. Song Yin stumbled back in shock and teleported 5 meters back. He thought the crisis was averted when his body suddenly erupted in a cold sweat. Just as he tried to see who was attacking him, he noticed that the cold aura was still right in front of him. Chi, minus 29,800. The cold light pierced through Song Yan's throat, and just like that, he was insta-killed. The teleportation that could normally save him had only served to delay his death by a few split seconds. Although it was an ambush, San Yin was still a natural esper, and his mind was far superior to those of normal humans, as were his senses. There were incredibly few people who could get close to him without him noticing, and even less people who could do so and insta-kill him. Sword! Emperor! San Yin stared at the gray shadow in front of him as he hoarsely spat out the two words, then fell heavily backward onto the ground. The silver sword, which had flown out, drew a beautiful arc and flew back toward the person in gray, returning to its sheath. The person in gray turned and silently left without leaving any trace of having been there. Elsewhere, winter of that year had taken less than half an hour to kill all the Yin Huang Alliance's mages, and had the time of his life. After the final toy fell, he joyfully picked up the items they had dropped. As the most elite mages of the Yin Huang Alliance, their equipment was all quite good, so the things they dropped were quite valuable. Winter of that year happily picked up everything, even the potions, and cleaned up the entire area. Finally, he picked up a LV-50 silver grade earring, which made him delirious with joy. Although the stats weren't quite useful to his profession, it was still a pair of silver grade earrings. After collecting all his spoils of war and looking at the empty scene in front of him, Winter of that year felt something wasn't right. He seemed to be missing something. After a few moments, he whacked his head as he jumped out. "Daw damn it! I forgot about that low IQ flame wizard! Huyudge!" Winter of that year instantly ran back towards their original location. However, once he arrived, he couldn't find San Yin. A sense of great worry erupted like a flame within him as he hurried towards the town. He desperately prayed that the guy hadn't passed through the town. However, even after reaching the town and passing through it, he didn't see San Yin. Winter of that year hurriedly called Yunmeng Xian. "Big sister goddess, did anyone go over to the new city?" No. Phew. Winter of that year instantly felt incredibly relieved, as if a massive stone had been taken off his heart. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he said, that's good. What happened?" Yunmeng Xian asked worriedly. Nothing much. Quite a few people came over just now, and were all killed by me. I was worried that some people snuck past and wanted to confirm that everything was fine. Thank you for your hard work." Although she felt quite suspicious, she did not ask more. She was completely grateful towards Winter of that year and 100 Miles of Ice. Without them, the new city would have been exposed long ago. When she had first met Winter of that year and 100 Miles of Ice, in order to protect the secret of the new city, she had used her most powerful weapon, her beauty. Winter of that year was mesmerized to the point that he couldn't speak properly, and not only did he promise that he wouldn't leak this information, but he even offered to help protect it. Back then she had simply smiled, believing that he said this recklessly, and would give up after a few days. However, unexpectedly, Winter of that year had remained until now, and 100 Miles of Ice had stayed with him. During this time, their strength completely shocked her. Although they were only 2 people, they were like a solid fort. Over the past few months, no one was able to get past them. The emotionless swordsman, 100 Miles of Ice, was once ranked 6th on the heaven rankings, and was a lone wolf who didn't join any guilds. However, Winter of that year was someone who she had never heard of before. Yunmeng Xian had been quite surprised. With Winter of that year's frightening power, it wouldn't be strange for him to appear on the heaven rankings, and yet his name was so unfamiliar. Afterward, she realized that Mystic Moon was actually the first virtual game he had played. Yunmeng Xian was certain that if the heaven rankings were updated, Winter of that year would definitely take one of the spots. Yunmeng Xian was incredibly surprised and moved that 2 experts, who were capable of being on the heaven rankings, would protect the new city until today, despite being complete strangers before. "What did you say?" Feng Xiaoyu? Hearing Song Yan's words, Long Tianyun deeply frowned. That's right. She's the Sword Emperor, while I'm the Flame Emperor. How could I be mistaken? Song Yan said with a dark expression. Being killed twice in one day was a massive blow and humiliation to Song Yan. He accepted being insta-killed by the Sword Emperor. Although they were both emperors, he understood how powerful the Sword Emperor was, and how easy it was for her to kill him. However, he simply couldn't understand why she had killed him. Were there any conflicts between you and Feng Xiaoyu? Long Tianyun suddenly asked. Song Yan thought for a moment before shaking his head. To be frank, I was quite afraid of her. As such, I rarely took the initiative to talk to her, much less offend her. Long Tianyun coldly laughed. Feng Xiaoyu has been missing for quite a long time. Both the Long family and Xianyuan family have continuously searched for her in the real world and virtual world, but we haven't found anything. This time, she revealed herself and killed you immediately. She has been consciously avoiding detection, so why would she kill you despite having no enmity with you, and reveal herself in the process? Song Yan also felt incredibly confused. You're not the first person to be killed at that place, Long Tianyun said in a low voice. 1 month ago, the black-white double demons were also there. However, apart from the archer, there was another person. In the end, the black-white double demons were beaten pitifully, and they could only run. The black-white double demons were a famous duo who were both on the Earth rankings. Half a year ago, our #1 assassin, Lightning Snake, also went there, but was stopped by those two people. He wasn't able to escape and died there. He immediately returned to challenge them again, but died even more pitifully and didn't dare to go again. Long Tianyun narrowed his eyes. I never thought that even you would die there. Now, have you understood something? Song Yan stared at him blankly. Even by conservative estimates, they'd been there for at least a month. 2 super experts like them should be exploring everywhere. Why would they stay at a place that was so remote, where so few players go? And why would they not allow anyone to pass through? Moreover, it seems like they don't even leave there at all. What's more, Feng Xiaoyu, who has been missing for a long time, exposed herself to kill you. There's only one possible explanation. They're protecting something near the town. Within that town, or behind that town, is a gigantic secret that they can't allow anyone to find out about. Recruitment. What sort of secret is it? Song Yan asked in surprise. I have no way to know, and I don't have much interest. However, you dying there and Feng Xiaoyu appearing there after hiding away for so long makes it necessary for me to personally make a trip there. Long Tianyun stood up as he coldly smiled. It doesn't matter that you were insta-killed by Feng Xiaoyu. However, I'm surprised that you were killed so easily by someone we've never heard about before. Is he really that strong? He's definitely a mental esper, Song Yan said as he gnashed his teeth. I saw his arrows change direction. Even after their second profession upgrade, archers can't have such a skill. The only possible explanation is that he used his mental energy to control the arrow incredibly precisely. Not only is he a mental esper, he's an incredibly powerful one at that. He's probably even stronger than some of the mental espers in our forces. Long Tianyun's expression became cold. Espers were incredibly rare, and only about 1 in millions of people would be espers. The espers in the Long family's 7 main forces were found all over China. As soon as they had heard an esper had appeared, they would immediately go try to recruit them. If they couldn't recruit them, they would use special methods to make their esper ability disappear. In extreme cases, they would make the person disappear from the world, out of fear that they would disrupt the balance. It could be said that apart from the ancient families in the south, more than 90% of China's espers were within the Long family's forces. In actuality, many people knew winner of that year's name because he had been in the top 10 of the player-level rankings for a long time. However, no one had any information on him, and no one had ever seen him before. Moreover, Winter of that year had concealed his IGN, so although Song Yin and Long Tianyun knew what he looked like, they couldn't match him up to his name. This allowed Long Tianyun to confirm that he wasn't an Esper from one of the Esper families in the south. Otherwise, he definitely would have known about him. Mental Esper abilities could be brought into the virtual world. This was no longer a secret. This was because mental Esper abilities existed in one's mind, which was what entered into the virtual world. As such, it was not surprising that one could use their mental Esper abilities in the virtual world. However, this did not affect the balance of the virtual game world too much. There were only 30 mental Espers in China, which had the biggest population, and most of them were under the control of the Long family. "Lead the way, I want to take a look," Long Tianyun said in a low voice. "Young master, I recommend that you don't personally go yourself," Song Yin said earnestly. "That archer is definitely more powerful than you expect. Apart from Ling Tian and the Sword Emperor, he's the only person who has caused me to suffer such a pitiful defeat. Moreover, I could feel that he wasn't going all out. Feng Xiaoyu seems to be on their side, so if she comes to stop us, I might not be able to protect young master." "That's right. When Feng Xiaoyu killed me, she was using the sword manipulation technique. It's possible that she has surpassed even Xianyuan Dao." "Sword manipulation?" Long Tianyun deeply frowned, then coldly spoke. "She's a genius of the Xianyuan family, who would be hard to find in even 1,000 years. Adding on the fact that she has completely cut off her emotions and dedicated herself to her sword, she has progressed incredibly quickly. It can be said that no one has ever achieved this, and no one ever will again. If I remember correctly, within the past 300 years only 2 people in the Xianyuan family have developed their sword intent to the level of sword manipulation. Both of these people reached this stage in their 70s. Xianyuan Dao's sword manipulation is merely using sword intent to forcefully control a sword's trajectory for a very brief period of time, and is not true sword manipulation. If Feng Xiaoyu truly reached the sword manipulation level, she would be the first person in the Xianyuan family to reach that level before the age of 30. However, it's a pity." Long Tianyun's eyes flashed with a cold light. "She betrayed the Xianyuan family and my Long family. What's even more of a pity is that right now, it's the age of technology. In front of modern weapons, cold weapons are simply pieces of scrap metal. Choose 200 elite players from each profession who have completed their second profession upgrade and set out immediately." 200 people from each profession was 1,400 people in total. With Long Tianyun personally going, all of these players had to be the elite among the elite. It was an incredibly impressive battle formation. 2 hours later, 100 miles of ice still had not returned. However, Winter of that year was not too worried. When he had done his quest, it had taken 3 hours. To an expert like him, the quest wasn't very difficult, only incredibly time-consuming. After facing those 2 waves of players, Winter of that year didn't dare to leave. He had a feeling that the Flame Wizard might come back. As expected, he did. When Winter of that year heard the rumbling from the distance, he jumped up as he looked toward the north. The look of relaxation disappeared from his face as his expression became incredibly serious. Because the party that came this time had more than 1,000 people. Winter of that year felt his scalp go numb, and he looked up as he cursed. "Boss, you bastard! Why did you have to choose such a bad time to do your profession upgrade quest? Arg!" After cursing loudly, he calmed down as he laughed and walked over. Just like before, he stood behind the 2-meter-tall rock. When the 1,000-man party was 50 meters away, he jumped out with his hands on his waist and yelled, "Halt! Everyone stop! The land behind this rock is my handsome self's personal property. No one's allowed to come close. Please immediately leave." The 1,400 players were in perfect ranks, and even walked in step, creating a mighty aura of foreboding. And yet, a single person had jumped out, trying to block their army. Instantly, countless gazes looked at winner of that year, as if he was an idiot. "It's him!" Song Yin, who was standing beside Long Tianyun, pointed out and spoke in a low voice. When he spoke, winter of that year noticed him as he grinned. "Io! Isn't this the little turd who I killed before? What, you miss your dear father?" Winter of that year inwardly cursed. That goddamn bastard had come back again. Last time, he brought 100 people, and this time he brought more than 1,000 people. Fudge! Was this really necessary? "You?" Song Yan's expression darkened as a ball of flames arose from his body. However, seeing the crappy bow that winter of that year held in front of him, he didn't dare to attack. After all, winter of that year had left him with too much trauma. If he attacked, but was once again reduced to the state where he couldn't even stand up, he would never be able to wash away the humiliation. If it had been before, and the Flame Emperor was insulted like this, he would instantly fly into a fit of rage. However, although the Flame Emperor had been infuriated to the point that his body lit up with fire, he stood there, unmoving. Long Tianyun looked at Song Yin before taking a step forward and asking, "Your name is winner of that year, right?" Although it was phrased as a question, this sentence was spoken like a statement. Winter of that year stared with wide eyes as he asked, How did you know my handsome self's name? Could it be that my handsome self is so famous that everyone knows my name?" "Ah ha ha ha. I knew it. With my handsome looks, which even the heavens are jealous of, how could I keep a low profile? I knew that I would soon be envied by all men and admired by all women." Long Tianyun's eyes twitched, and the Yin Huang Alliance's players stared in disbelief as their stomachs flipped and turned, feeling as if yesterday's lunch would come out. "It was a guess. I didn't think it would actually be you," Long Tianyun said as he narrowed his eyes. "Winter of that year has remained in the top 10 of the player level rankings for a long time, and is the highest leveled archer in all of China. However, we could never find any information regarding this unfamiliar name. And you, someone we've never seen before, were able to defeat 100 elites single-handedly. As such, I couldn't help but link you with that name." Winter of that year chuckled. Really? It seems that you've been paying attention to my handsome self for quite some time. Don't tell me you're a loyal fan." "Ah ha ha ha. I get it. You've admired me for a long time, and after finding out that I'm here, you decided to come see me with your own eyes, right? Don't worry. I'm a very easygoing person, and I won't treat my fans condescendingly. Look all you want. Do you want an autograph? My handsome self has already laboriously done autographs for 30 years, and every autograph is worth tens of thousands of dollars. However, seeing how sincere you are, I'll fulfill your desire." The expressions on the Yin Huang Alliance's players' faces darkened. The noble alliance master of the Yin Huang Alliance. The #1 person in the virtual world in China is your fan? Go screw yourself. Long Tianyun laughed. "Indeed, I've heard of your esteemed name before. However, there's no need for an autograph. Today, I came here to meet a legendary figure like you, as well as propose a deal." "Deal? What sort of deal?" Winter of that year asked with wide eyes. "What do you think about joining my Yin Huang Alliance?" Long Tianyun said as he smiled. "I'm sure you've heard of the Yin Huang Alliance before. As long as you join, I can promise that within 3 months you'll become the president of all of the Yin Huang Alliance's archers. When that time comes, let alone in China, players all over the world will know your name." Hearing this, Everyone who had come with Long Tianyun were dumbfounded. The way they looked at winter of that year completely changed. There were millions of archers in the Yin Huang Alliance, and presidents were subordinate only to the Alliance Master. He would be on the same rank as the Flame Emperor. This was a promise that the Alliance Master Long Tianyun had personally made. What sort of abilities did this person have? How could the Alliance Master suddenly make such a big promise? They didn't know what had happened earlier, but Long Tianyun did. This archer, with trash equipment, had single-handedly destroyed the Flame Emperor and took down 100 elite mages while remaining unscathed. This sort of monstrous strength qualified him to be in the top 5 in China. No top 3. If this person joined the Yin Huang Alliance, he could even replace the Sword Emperor's position. Song Yan's face became incredibly stiff, and he couldn't utter a word. After all, this archer's strength was something that was undeniable, so it was no strange matter that Long Tianyun would try to recruit him like this. This trash is the Flame Emperor. Although Long Tianyun's offer was spoken in a few short sentences, it was something that almost no one could resist. As the largest guild in the world, becoming the president of the archers would mean that one would have millions of players at their command. Moreover, their name would be known by almost everyone. How many people had this sort of glory? Who could refuse such a thing? Long Tianyun was sincerely recruiting winter of that year. After being turned upside down by Ling Chen, the East Ocean continent still had not fully recovered, and most Japanese players didn't dare to even mention Ling Chen's name. This caused Long Tianyun to realize how terrifying Ling Chen was. He could bring disaster to entire cities, how much more so to a guild. Against Ling Chen, numbers were essentially meaningless. What Long Tianyun needed were super experts. The archer in front of him was one such person. After speaking, Long Tianyun put his hands behind his back as he stared at winter of that year with a bright gaze, waiting for his reply. What? Yin Huang. Yin Huang Alliance. You're from the Yin Huang Alliance? Winter of that year's face was full of shock, as if he was scared by the Yin Huang Alliance's name. Suddenly, he started yelling out as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Wait, 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 wait! No wonder why you look so familiar. Yin Huang Alliance. Yin Huang Alliance. Are you the Alliance Master, Long Tianyun? The Yin Huang Alliance's players all sneered. He only just recognized the Alliance Master of the Yin Huang Alliance. Just how ignorant and stupid could this person be? Although Long Tianyun was quite surprised that winter of that year hadn't recognized him immediately, seeing him react like this made Long Tianyun feel quite pleased. He smiled as he replied, That's right, I am Long Tianyun. As such, what I just said represents the entire Yin Huang Alliance. There's not a single word of falsity. In actuality, when this army of people had arrived, winter of that year had already recognized Long Tianyun. Although he wasn't very in touch with the rest of the world, he still wasn't so ignorant as to not even recognize Long Tianyun. When winter of that year saw him, he realized that the flame wizard who he had killed belonged to the Yin Huang Alliance. After failing twice, the flame wizard actually asked Long Tianyun to come. There was only a single flame wizard who could make Long Tianyun come out here, and that was the Flame Emperor. Oh my goodness! It's actually Alliance Master Long this. Winter of that year pretended to look at a loss, with a slight trace of fear in his expression. He stretched out his finger as he pointed at Song Yan. Then that person, he's... Long Tianyun looked at Song Yan as he replied, I'm sure you've heard of the Flame Emperor before, right? What? Flame Emperor? Winter of that year started to yell, as if he had heard the most incomprehensible thing in history. He started to furiously shake his head. He's the legendary Flame Emperor? What a joke! How could you, as the Alliance Master of the Yin Huang Alliance, try to trick a pure-hearted person like me? How could that guy be the Flame Emperor? I heard that the Flame Emperor is ranked 4th on China's heaven rankings and is the #1 mage in China. No, the whole world. I heard that he could fight 100 people at once. No, he could probably incinerate an army of 1,000,000 people. A peerless, invincible existence like him is someone who a tiny figure like me doesn't even have the right to look up to. He'd probably be able to annihilate me with a pinky finger. Sure, this guy's a flame wizard, but before, when he fought my handsome self, he was reduced to a pitiful state where he couldn't even get up from the ground, and even called me his dear father, trying to beg me to show mercy. Moreover, he has an incredibly vile mouth, shaming his entire family. If I was his father, I'd slap him to death. You're saying trash like this is the Flame Emperor? Could the Flame Emperor be beaten like a dog by me, who just hit LV50 and has only trash equipment? Sure, I'd believe you if you said his mother's a pig, but him being the Flame Emperor? No way. That's an insult to the Flame Emperor's great name. Are you trying to trick me? I won't believe you, no matter what. Winter of that year spoke incredibly emotionally and with an indignant tone. His spittle flew everywhere. He praised the legendary Flame Emperor like there was no tomorrow, and insulted the real Flame Emperor as if he was less than a dog. The Yin Huang Alliance's players all stared with wide eyes and open mouths, and simply couldn't process what was happening. Afterwards, they realized that the Flame Emperor must have been pitifully beaten by this archer, and this archer was evidently using the Flame Emperor's fame to humiliate him even more. In other words, he had defeated even the Flame Emperor to the point that he couldn't even get up from the ground. No wonder why the Alliance Master had offered him such favorable terms in trying to recruit him. You? Bastard, I'll kill you. All of the pores on Sun Yan's body were letting out smoke, and even if he had 10 more lungs, they would have all exploded from anger. All of his rationality disappeared as he instantly went crazy. He teleported out as his entire body erupted with flames, and a devouring firestorm, which was channeled incredibly quickly, was about to be launched out towards Winter of that year. A cold light flashed in Winter of that year's eyes. Just as Sun Yan roared out, he made sufficient preparations. The instant Sun Yan teleported out, Winter of that year shot out a crippling feather arrow. No one saw him draw his bow or shoot the arrow. They could only see a hazy blur of motion as the arrow rushed out. Bang! The instant the devouring firestorm was about to be unleashed, the crippling feather arrow hit Sun Yan in the middle of his forehead, causing him to fall to the ground and roll as the flames around his body disappeared. Winter of that year inwardly gave a cold laugh as he raised his rattan-wood bow and used normal attacks to unhurriedly shoot at Sun Yan. Sun Yan, who was furious to the extreme, tried to stand back up but was continuously shot down by Winter of that year's arrows. He looked like an animal repeatedly kowtowing on the ground. It was an extremely unsightly scene, but no matter what he did, he simply could not stand up. Moreover, Winter of that year's voice continuously sounded out in his ears. Look! Look! Doesn't he look like a dog? You're saying this trash is the Flame Emperor? This is the Flame Emperor? Look at my equipment! The best I have is copper grade, and none of them have any skills. If this guy is the Flame Emperor, then I'm the Emperor of Heaven. Long Tianyun's face fell, his mind overwhelmed by shock. His shock wasn't from the Flame Emperor being humiliated like this. It was because he personally saw every single one of Winter of that year's arrows hitting the exact center of Sun Yan's forehead. Every single arrow was incredibly precise. Compared to Sun Yan's narrative, seeing this sort of thing personally shocked Long Tianyun much, much more. If an archer's arrows hit the exact center of their target's forehead, there was a 100% chance of knocking them down and interrupting any spells or skills they were about to cast. Normally, even if an archer shot 10,000 times, it was unlikely they would be able to make even a single shot. Even for godly archers, it was almost impossible for them to hit that point, even on a stationary target. And yet, this archer in front of him was hitting that point on every single shot. What monstrous abilities! This was something that no one had ever seen or even heard about before. This was a feat impossible for humans. Let alone retaliate, the Flame Emperor couldn't even stand up. If it was that Ling Chen, if he was hit even once, he would never be able to make a comeback. Long Tianyun became tens of times more desperate to recruit winner of that year. He walked up as he said in a loud voice, "This friend, please stop now. Son Yen, immediately come back." Hearing Long Tianyun say this, winter of that year stopped attacking and put away his bow as he gave a polite smile. "Although this trash tried to attack me first, since Alliance Master Long has spoken, my handsome self will give him some face." "AI! Alliance Master Long, you can't do this. How could you say that trash is the Flame Emperor? How could the Flame Emperor be so useless? Even though he's Alliance Master Long's subordinate, my handsome self doesn't think this sort of joke is funny. No, this sort of joke is a humiliation to the real Lord Flame Emperor. Alliance Master Long, please don't make this sort of joke again. If the real Flame Emperor heard about this, he'd definitely be furious, right?" Song Yin finally stood up, and his face was bright red as his body let off smoke. He deeply breathed in and out. The first time, only winner of that year had been there when he had been humiliated. This time, there was Long Tianyun, as well as more than 1,000 other players. The humiliation he felt was much, much greater. His head buzzed, and he couldn't even hear what Long Tianyun was saying. He stood in his place as he pointed at winter of that year, his entire body trembling. He couldn't even speak as his vision darkened, and he fainted on the spot. Winter of that year rolled his eyes. He fainted again? This guy's mental endurance was way too low. How could the boss be ranked below this guy on the heaven rankings? Long Tianyun's expression did not change as he motioned for people to carry Song Yin away. When he turned to look at winter of that year again, his expression was incredibly calm, as if nothing had happened. As he spoke, "Are you willing to join our Yin Huang Alliance? Also, I know you have a friend called 100 Miles of Ice. If he is willing, we wholeheartedly welcome him to join us as well." Winter of that year was not at all interested in joining the Yin Huang Alliance. However, he did not immediately refuse, and instead stalled for time as he desperately thought. The army in front of him was not something that he could deal with, but escaping would be a piece of cake. However, if they passed through the area he was guarding and continued forward, the new city would be exposed. It would be exposed to the Yin Huang Alliance, who could not find out about it, no matter what. In that case, he should pretend to join the Yin Huang Alliance, with one of the conditions being that they couldn't step into his territory. After making this decision, winter of that year excitedly and nervously rubbed his hands together. The Yin Huang Alliance is China's biggest guild, and although I haven't played any virtual games before, I've long since known of it. Joining the Yin Huang Alliance is an extremely glorious matter, and becoming the president of all archers is something that I don't even dare to dream about. It's just that once I join, I'll have to obey all of Alliance Master's orders, and won't have my freedom anymore. I've become used to having my freedom, so I'm not sure if I should accept or not. How about? As he spoke, he suddenly made his decision as he straightened up and said, I only have one condition for joining the Yin Huang Alliance." "Oh, what is it?" Long Tianyun asked. "Give me 10 days. After 10 days, I'll come join the Yin Huang Alliance," winter of that year said sincerely. "Why do you need 10 days? If it's to do anything, my Yin Huang Alliance will help you," Long Tianyun unhurriedly replied. "I don't need to trouble Alliance Master Long with this. I just need to stand guard here for 10 days and not allow anyone to pass. Winter of that year said, That's my condition. I hope that within these 10 days, Alliance Master Long will not try to pass by this place. 10 days later, I'll come to join the Yinhuan Alliance. So, in other words, the new city will be complete in 10 days? Long Tianyun said as he smiled. New city? What new city? Winter of that year looked perplexed. Winter of that year looked like he had no idea what Long Tianyun was talking about, causing Long Tianyun to feel surprised. Was he wrong? After all, Winter of that year had been guarding this place for a long time, refusing to allow anyone to pass through. Evidently, he didn't want anyone to see what was happening to the south. Moreover, for him to stay here for so long, and be so wary, the only possibility was that some faction had obtained the city creation token and was secretly building a city. This was because unless one held absolute power, they couldn't risk letting anyone else find out. The weaker the faction was, the more they needed to protect this secret. There was only a single city creation token in an entire region, and it was something that every powerful guild desired. If they found out that someone was building a city and was weaker than them, they would definitely go to fight them in order to steal the city creation token. Long Tianyun was sure that for him to suddenly say this, if this really was the case, Winter of that year would certainly have become flustered, giving away the secret. However, seeing him look so confused, it seemed that it really might not be a new city. However, apart from a new city, why would he stay here for so long? Long Tianyun became more and more curious, and deeply desired to know what was hidden towards the south. The Sword Emperor was only a minor part of the reason why he had come. The main reason was because he wanted to personally confirm just what was happening here. Over my dead body. To my knowledge, you and your friend have stood guard here for nearly 2 months, possibly even longer. I'm very curious why experts like you would stay at such a place for such a long time, Long Tianyun slowly asked. Although Winter of that year had reacted perfectly, he was sweating all over his body. He beat his chest as he replied, For a promise. A promise from a man to a woman. Because of this promise, I need to stand guard here. For 10 days. Alliance Master Long, I'm sure you would agree that promises are incredibly important to men. Indeed. Long Tianyun smiled as he nodded. In that case, what sort of secret are you protecting behind you? Mind to share it with me? Since it's a secret, I naturally can't say. However, I can promise that Alliance Master Long won't be interested in this secret at all. Winter of that year dryly laughed. I'm sure Alliance Master Long won't make things difficult for me, right? Long Tianyun remained calm as he replied, What if I must know? Winter of that year shrugged. Then I'll never join the Yinhuan Alliance. I'm sure Alliance Master Long isn't a person of such low tolerance. Long Tianyun looked at him as he spoke in an indifferent tone. Is there a difference? After all, you never planned to join the Yinhuan Alliance. If you did, you wouldn't have dared to humiliate the Flame Emperor like this. After joining, you'll have to work with the Flame Emperor. Even if there was enmity between you, you wouldn't continue provoking him. Moreover, you agreed too quickly. You have an important friend who you're always with. If you were truly considering joining, you would have first discussed with him. However, he's not here, and yet you agreed too readily. Do you think I'd be tricked so easily? Winter of that year's mind froze, as cold sweat started to rush down his body, and he inwardly cursed. Screw the Long family's 18 generations of ancestors. I hope a big rock falls down and crushes you all into pancakes. Winter of that year knew that there was no use pretending anymore, so he once again equipped his bow and raised it up as he said helplessly, Since Alliance Master Long's determined to see what's behind me, then there's nothing left for me to say. His expression became savage as he roared. However, if you want to get past me, You'll have to step over my dead body. Winter of that year stood incredibly straight with his bow raised high. His expression was no longer uninterested and lazy, but fierce and resolute. He didn't have any intention of retreating. Step over your dead body? Long Tianyun laughed. There's no need for that. Long Tianyun's expression became cold as he gestured with his right hand, commanding, All players, ignore him and split up as you move to the south. I'll say it again. Charge to the south as quickly as you can. Even if this person attacks you, ignore him. Charge! An order from Long Tianyun himself was the highest order in the Yin-Huang alliance. Everyone roared out as they put away their weapons and put on equipment that gave them the most movement speed, rushing toward the south. They all completely ignored Winter of that year. This caused Winter of that year, who had prepared for a massive fight, to feel quite shocked. Before, if the 100 people Sanyan brought with him had all split up and charged, even Winter of that year would not be able to stop them. However, Long Tianyun was different than Song Yen. Song Yen had come to kill Winter of that year, and was not at all interested in what Song Yen was guarding. However, Long Tianyun was not interested in Winter of that year, but wanted to know the secret behind him. After assassins did their second profession upgrade, they could either become Slayers or Shadowless. Slayers had the strongest physical attack damage and explosive power, and could insta-kill unsuspecting targets, while Shadowless had the most powerful movement abilities. As such, in terms of movement abilities, Shadowless were ranked first, then Slayers, then Marksmen, then Hunters. The army of over 1,000 people split up into a massive line that spanned hundreds of meters and simultaneously charged. Winter of that year was completely dumbfounded. He had been prepared to die, and yet these people weren't attacking him. If it was just 2 or 3 people, he would have just dealt with them. Even 9 or 10 people would be no problem. However, even if he had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would be unable to stop them. He had stood guard here for almost 2 months, and had long since made this his duty. Seeing the new city grow day by day, he grown quite attached to it. Moreover, he was completely smitten with Yunmeng Xian. How could he allow all of this to go to waste? Stop right there! All of you stop right there! A machine gun arrow swept out, shooting the 6 Shadowless in the front to the ground. However, there were still more than 1,000 people charging up. When he tried to attack others, the 6 people who he had shot down got back up and continued to run. His equipment was simply too trash, and he was unable to insta-kill them. His obstructions, in front of so many people, were completely useless. As he stood in shock, more than half of the Shadowless had passed by where he was and rushed south. After attacking, the Slayers also reached him and quickly passed by. Winter of that year furiously roared and unleashed his full speed, quickly catching up to the Shadowless and Slayers as he swiftly attacked. Every time he attacked, he would knock at least one person down. However, the army came closer and closer to the new city. Even if he put in all his effort, it would be akin to pouring a glass of water on a burning house. Long Tianyun continued to stand in his place. There was no need for him to personally go and look, because if the players discovered anything, they would immediately notify him. Seeing Winter of that year desperately try to stop them, he began to feel more and more curious. Just what was hidden there? At this moment, he saw Winter of that year suddenly stop in his tracks as he stood there. "Ha, he's given up," Long Tianyun said as he laughed. If he had seen Winter of that year's face, he would have seen his pupils dilate to a terrifying extent. "You forced me to do this." Winter of that year spoke slowly, each word as heavy as a boulder. Winter of that year slowly raised his rattan wood bow as 6 ordinary arrows were placed on the bowstring. Only the machine gun arrows could shoot out 6 arrows simultaneously. As he released the arrows, they streaked through the air towards the 6 people closest to him. This was an ordinary skill using ordinary arrows, and seemed like the powerless attacks he had launched before. However, the only difference was that after shooting out those 6 arrows, he continued to maintain that posture, looking like a statue. However, his pupils continuously dilated and contracted. Swish, 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 swish. The 6 arrows all found their targets, and hit them all exactly in the center of their foreheads. 6 critical hit damage figures floated up, as the 6 people who were hit fell to the ground. Normally, unless an archer's arrows had a piercing effect, or the skill had a piercing effect, the arrows would disappear after hitting a target. Machine gun arrows didn't have a piercing effect, nor did Winter of that year's bow or the arrows that he had used. However, after hitting their targets, the 6 arrows did not disappear, and instead pierced through their heads and continued forwards. In the next second, they hit another 6 people in the center of their foreheads, then once again pierced through their heads and even sped up as they hit another 6 people. In just an instant, 18 people had fallen. However, this was not the end, it was just the beginning. The 6 arrows did not disappear, and instead became faster and faster. They traveled so quickly that even 100 meters away, one could hear the sound of them tearing through the air. Soon, they reached such a speed that they couldn't be followed by the naked eye. It seemed as if these 6 arrows would never stop, and instead became like 6 death god signs as they passed through 1 player every second, then 2 players every second, then 3, 10, 20. Their range also became larger and larger. 6 wild gusts of wind swept up on the grassy plains, within which pitiful cries sounded out. The 6 arrows continuously sped around, piercing through bodies. That's right, the 6 arrows covered the entire area within 100 meters, creating a 100-meter wide net. Everyone who had passed by Winter of that year was caught within the net as the arrows pierced through their bodies. Minus 2,984, minus 2,888, minus 2,649, minus 2,758, 2552. Winter of that year's attack power was incredibly weak, and despite his attacks resulting in a critical hit each time, they never exceeded 3,000 damage. However, the 6 arrows passed through over 700 targets. All of them were pierced by at least 1 arrow around every second. No matter how much HP one had, it was impossible to defend against such terrifying loss of HP. The 6 arrows created a net of annihilation, as the Yin Huang Alliance's players died in droves. The players further back stopped in their tracks as they stared at the spectacle in front of them. Half of them became so shocked that they almost lost their ability to think, and the other half slowly retreated in terror. Whoosh! The storm of arrows that had persisted for 10 or so seconds suddenly stopped as the 6 arrows disappeared. The places where they had traveled left corpses strewn across the ground. Not a single player remained alive within those 100 meters. Long Tianyun's expression froze, and his throat became so dry that he couldn't utter a sound. Winter of that year heavily fell to his knees, his eyes incredibly dim. He kept his body upright with his arms, not allowing himself to fall into unconsciousness as he spoke with a trembling, but incredibly resolute voice. "If you want to get past me, you'll have to step over my dead body." Man-made God, the Yin Huang Alliance's players all stood there transfixed, their minds completely blank after the shock of seeing what had just occurred. Did that really just happen? Was it a hallucination? Was it some sort of superpower that only appeared in sci-fi movies? Were they dreaming? The enormous grassy plains fell into a terrifying silence as everyone stood still, exactly where they were. Not a single one of them dared to advance. Long Tianyun felt just as shocked. However, he was the Long family's young master, and the Long family had the largest Esper unit in the world. As such, Long Tianyun had come into contact with many espers before. It was obvious to him that the shocking scene wasn't some archer ability, but that this archer used his mental energy to control those 6 arrows, enabling them to become a hellstorm of arrows. 6 arrows. In the end, every arrow's speed surpassed the speed of sound, and each one of them had precisely hit each player in the middle of their forehead. Just how terrifying did his mental energy have to be to achieve such a thing? Despite seeing so many espers before, Long Tianyun had never met such a powerful one. Even Murong Xiong Tian, who was called the strongest esper in China, wasn't at such a level. In fact, this sort of power was no longer an esper ability. After all, despite being powerful, esper abilities were still within the limits of an ordinary human range. What had just happened was something that could only occur in a legend. What sort of monster was this young man, who appeared to be no more than 20 years old? How could there be such a person in China without the Long family knowing? After Ling Tian, how could another monster appear, which the Long family had no idea about? Looking at Winter of that year, who was kneeling on the ground and hadn't stood up, Long Tianyun quickly calmed down. He looked around him as he said in a low voice, "What are you all standing there for? I told you to run towards the south and ignore everything else. Are you all deaf? This person has used up all of his mental energy and can't even stand anymore. What are you afraid of?" Hearing Long Tianyun's voice, the Yin Huang Alliance's players felt as if they had just awoken from a dream. However, the shock within their hearts couldn't be dispelled so easily, and they suppressed the trembling within their hearts as they looked at Winter of that year in fright, finally running towards the south again. Hearing the noise, Winter of that year tried to get up, but whenever he tried to use his strength, the pain in his head became even worse. He felt as if his head was going to explode, let alone standing up. He couldn't even speak. Realizing they were not being stopped, the players all let out a sigh of relief as they continued to run. They ran over the corpses of the players from before, and didn't even turn to look at Winter of that year. After running far away, Winter of that year was still kneeling in the same place. Long Tianyun slowly walked over, and stood to the side of Winter of that year with his hands behind his back as he calmly said, "To be honest, that spectacular performance from before gave me quite a scare. From what you did just then, I can say that all of the espers I've seen combined together are inferior to you. Moreover, you're much younger than all of them." Winter of that year gave a cold harumph as he closed his eyes and calmed himself down, trying to recover as quickly as possible. He wasn't surprised that Long Tianyun knew what he had just done. "I've heard them talk about the consequences of overusing their mental energy, a pain akin to 10,000 arrows piercing your brain, as if you've fallen to the 18th level of hell. And yet, you haven't even cried out once, and even formed a complete sentence just now. I can't help but respect you. You deserve the title of a true man," Long Tianyun said as he smiled. "Tell your people to stop," Winter of that year said as he gritted his teeth. "Which man-made god are you?" Long Tianyun suddenly asked a seemingly random question. Hearing this, Winter of that year felt as if he heard a peal of thunder. He suddenly raised his head as a look of shock appeared in his eyes. "You? So I was right." Long Tianyun frowned deeply. He hadn't expected anything out of this, but Winter of that year's reaction gave him a terrifying answer. After Winter of that year reacted like that, he realized Long Tianyun had been guessing. If he was in his normal state, hearing the words man-made god would bring a great shock to him, but he wouldn't have reacted so intensely. However, he had used up all of his mental energy, and hearing the name, he responded instinctively. "How do you know that name?" Winter of that year's face slightly twisted as he coldly asked. Long Tianyun felt utterly dismayed. He never thought that man-made gods actually existed. He said in a low voice, In the Beizhou city's northern parts, nearest to the North Pole, the temperature has always been below 0 degrees Celsius and is always covered with snow. There aren't many people living there, and nothing usually happens there. However, a few years ago, a large number of children from 8 to 12 years old disappeared. Despite all the investigations done, nothing was found. 6 years ago, there was an explosion in the center of the Indian Ocean, which could be heard hundreds of kilometers away. Many countries worked together to investigate the source of this explosion and found a nameless island. The island was mostly blown up, and there were still some remains left. Some of them had DNA that was able to be extracted. Through my long family's investigations, we found that some of the DNA matched with the children who had gone missing from the Beizhou city. Winter of that year. Moreover, within all the wreckage, we also discovered a bit of data that was not completely destroyed, although it was heavily damaged. After being analyzed by the world's top deciphering experts for 2 weeks, we discovered information about the man-made god plan, as well as some fragmented data about man-made gods. Long Tianyun lowered his head as he looked at Winter of that year and said, "Your home was in the Beizhou city, right? You were one of those children who went missing back then. After disappearing, you were taken to that nameless island that was blown up and became one of the experiments that became known as a man-made god. From the information we obtained, the man-made god plan greatly reduces a person's lifespan in order to develop a terrifying ability. These people are able to surpass humanity's limits and reach the level of gods. However, the consequence of such power is that their lifespan is shortened to merely another 10 years. Moreover, this cruel experiment causes the subjects to feel indescribable pain, and the success rate is terrifyingly low. Only around 1 in 1,000 experiments succeeded, and those who investigated this were all completely shocked to learn about it. That's the information we received from restoring the data, and it was listed as a national secret by the 5 countries who investigated it as well. Less than 30 people in the world know about this. The mental abilities that you just displayed, combined with your age, made me think of the man-made gods, so I decided to ask and see if I was right. I never thought that you would actually be a man-made god, though," Long Tianyun said as he frowned. Back then, they deduced that the explosion was caused by an experiment that went wrong and that a mysterious terrorist organization and all of their experimental subjects were blown to smithereens. Now, it seems like this national secret wasn't as everyone thought. You're a man-made god, so does that mean the terrorist organization that created you still exists? Long Tianyun coldly asked. Organization? Heh? Winter of that year gave a frigid laugh. What organization? It was a single person. A person who called himself the mad scientist, and was terrifying beyond belief. But who would believe such a thing? Winter of that year endured the pain in his head as he gritted his teeth and replied, "That island was equipped with technology that surpassed everything on Earth, and even the most high-tech of satellites couldn't detect its existence. Even boats and ships that came near were redirected away by the interference so that they could never arrive at the island. If the island hadn't exploded, none of you would have found it, and the one who caused the explosion was me." "You?" "That's right." Thinking back to the scene from that year, a look of delight appeared on Winter of that year's face. "I waited for a rare opportunity and blew up the island. I thought that I would definitely die, but unexpectedly I survived. However, I fell into a coma for a few years. When I woke up, I was already back in China. As for the terrorist organization, it would be best for you if they died in that explosion. However, if they haven't died, even if there were 10 Long families, you wouldn't be able to find them." Long Tianyun looked at him as he asked, "Is 100 miles of ice also a man-made god?" "That's right." Winter of that year didn't deny it. There were 3,000 experimental subjects for the man-made god plan, and only 4 were successfully lived. 100 miles of ice, and now we're 2 of them. After the explosion, we were the only survivors. Feeling relieved? Long Tianyun thought for a moment before slowly saying, "From the amount of time that has passed and your age, it seems that your life should almost be up, right?" The power Winter of that year had displayed was simply shocking. However, he had obtained this power at the cost of 90% of his lifespan. If it was Long Tianyun, even if he was offered 10 times as much power, he wouldn't accept such a trade. "I'll have to disappoint you." His headache was receding, and Winter of that year's mind was recovering at an incredible rate. 100 miles of ice, and I still have about a year to live. Within that year, we can do many things. 1 year, was it? Long Tianyun looked at him meaningfully as he calmly said, "Join my Yinhuan alliance then. I'm sure you don't want the power that you exchanged with your lives to go to waste. If you join my Yinhuan alliance, you'll be able to fully use your powers. Moreover, as the alliance master, I can promise you that your position will only be lower to mine, and you'll be famous everywhere under the heavens." Most importantly, Long Tianyun's eyes flashed as he said in a low voice, "With my Long family's abilities, perhaps we can find a way to extend your lifespans." Exposed teaser. You want me to join the Yinhuan alliance and become your Long family's lackey? Winter of that year asked, as he coldly laughed. Lackey? Long Tianyun shook his head. If you join the Yinhuan alliance, it'll merely be a relationship of cooperation between us. I'll borrow your power to fulfill my goals, and you can receive whatever you want from us. If you feel that we can't give you what you want, or that what we've given you is less than what you've given us, then you can leave, and we won't try to stop you. I simply can't understand why you're hesitating. Don't you think that wasting the power you've obtained, at the cost of your lifespan, is incredibly stupid? So what if it's stupid, if it's for a promise that you made? Winter of that year coldly smiled. Since I don't have long to live, why can't I live as I wish? I just want to do the things that I want to do. For the things I don't want to do, even if the Emperor of Heaven kneels down and begs me, I still won't do them. Long Tianyun raised his eyebrows as he said, Promise? You said that you made a promise to a woman. It seems that that woman is quite important to you. In that case, you probably harbor some romantic feelings towards this woman, but you know that given your circumstances, all you can do is bury those feelings inside your heart. Moreover, you feel inferior to her. As such, you didn't say anything and only stood guard here for her, right? Winter of that year was speechless. Long Tianyun was completely correct. If you join my Yinhuan alliance, I'll make that woman yours. How about that? Long Tianyun said, smiling calmly. To him, this was an incredibly simple matter because there were very few women who his Long family couldn't control. No need to answer quickly. Before Winter of that year could reply, Long Tianyun continued, I'll give you enough time to think about it. Right now, your mind isn't too well, so have a think about my words after you've fully recovered. After speaking, Long Tianyun turned and began walking toward the south. He truly wanted to rope in Winter of that year. The power Ling Tian had displayed in the East Ocean continent was like a nightmare to him, making it difficult for him to eat and sleep. He desperately needed someone who could suppress Ling Tian, and he saw this hope within Winter of that year. Moreover, as a man-made god, 100 miles of ice's strength would be similar to Winter of that year's. Long Tianyun remembered that in the previous China mock battle, the silent 100 miles of ice was the greatest dark horse. He slaughtered his way into the top 10, and he was given the right to enter the heaven rankings, causing all of the Chinese players to know of this solitary swordsman's name. In the heaven ranking battles, he defeated Xiao Qiufeng, then battled the Sword Emperor Feng Xiaoyu. However, never appeared at that battle, and Feng Xiaoyu had won by default. In the end, Xiao Qiufeng was ranked 6th out of the 9 people who had shown up. However, because he was defeated by 100 Miles of Ice, 100 Miles of Ice was ranked 6th, while he was ranked 7th. In other words, this result was only because 100 Miles of Ice had suddenly left. Most people guessed that 100 Miles of Ice had left because he knew he was no match for the Sword Emperor, so he attempted to save face by skipping the battle. That was what Long Tianyun had originally thought too. However, now he knew that things may have been different than they appeared at the time. It was very likely that 100 Miles of Ice was trying to hide his true power. If he could recruit winner of that year and 100 Miles of Ice into the Yin Huang Alliance, adding on the equipment that the Yin Huang Alliance could provide, they could definitely defeat Ling Tian. When the time was right, they could even bring them to the Long family and extract the secrets of the man-made gods by experimenting on them. Once they did this, the Long family would be able to mass create these man-made gods. When that happened, who could possibly stand up to the Long family? In just a few breaths of time, countless ideas sped through Long Tianyun's mind. He had walked quite far away, and yet winter of that year had not yet caught up. The mental fatigue he was dealing with was not something that could be overcome quickly. "Alliance Master, we've discovered something." The voice coming from his communication device was incredibly excited. Long Tianyun stopped walking as his eyes became serious. "Speak." "Less than 10 kilometers away from this town, there's a city under construction." "No, it's nearly complete." "The city's quite large, and because we're quite far away, we can't confirm if it's a city built by players. Although it's unlikely, if it is, then—" "A city? And it was about to be completed?" Blood rushed to Long Tianyun's head, becoming so excited that he nearly dropped the communication device he was holding in his hand. It was a city. A player's city. He had been correct. Apart from building a city, what could take such a long time? Moreover, there were 2 super experts guarding here day and night for a few months. That meant that a few months ago, someone had already obtained a city creation token. The only city creation token of the region. A city creation token was the only thing that gave players the right to build a city in the virtual world. Moreover, in the virtual world, only one city could be built by players in each region. In that case, this city would become the capital for all players, while the owner of this city would become an emperor. Who wouldn't want such honor and glory? Long Tianyun desired it so much that it was almost an obsession. After more and more people in the Yin Huang Alliance completed the second profession upgrade, he had ordered the entire Yin Huang Alliance to obtain the city creation token at all costs. However, who would have thought that someone had already obtained the city creation token a few months ago, and the new city was about to be completed? Long Tianyun's body erupted with sweat. If Song Yin hadn't stumbled across this place, if he hadn't come here personally, he would only have found out about the new city after it was complete. When that time came, it would have been too late. This was because other factions could only attack and stop a city from being built while it was still being constructed. Moreover, because this was a battle between players, NPCs could not interfere. However, if the city was complete, the situation was different. If the city was completed and NPCs were residing there, they could also retaliate and protect the city. How could players fight against high-leveled NPCs? Even if no NPCs were residing within the city, the owner of the city could recruit some high-leveled city guards from main cities, or the royal city, and use them as their own city guards. Those LV-100 city guards could slice apart players like vegetables. As such, even for the Yin Huang Alliance, taking down a completed city would be incredibly difficult. However, what Long Tianyun never expected was that within the new city were mysterious god-grade beings, like Greenwood. If the new city was fully constructed, even if the Yin Huang Alliance attacked with their full strength, they would be decimated as easily as Greenwood waving his head. Hurry up and confirm which faction that city belongs to. Long Tianyan roared out. That side should know that all of you are drawing near, so they'll have many troops stationed there. Even if you all die, I want to know who the owner of the city is. After hanging up, Long Tianyan's expression changed as he quickly hurried over. He wanted to personally have a look at this new city. Just as he had expected, because winter of that year was unable to stop all of them, he must have reported to the new city to make preparations. However, what he would never have expected was that there was only a single player guarding there, Yunming Xian. There were no defensive troops at all. The construction of the new city was still ongoing, and it had not stopped since the very first day. The most glamorous administrative region was already complete, and the construction spread out from there, creating the outline of a beautiful city. After working for a few months, the dwarves remained just as enthusiastic. Every day, they wiped their sweat, ate delicious food, and watched in delight as their new home came closer and closer to completion. They felt an incredible amount of joy every day. The fairies were not idle either. Some of them used their special abilities to transport wood and stones from the fairy forest, and others continuously cast their blessing magic, helping the dwarves recover their strength. Big sister! Big sister! Oh no! There are so many people coming over! Big sister! Kyre flapped her wings as she hurriedly flew over, crying out in panic. Yunming Xian turned around, her eyes also filled with worry. Just then she had received a message from Winter of that year saying that they had been exposed. What's more, it was Long Tianyun who had personally led an army here. Kyre, don't worry. The heavens won't let all of our hard work to go to waste. Tell your father and all of the dwarves not to worry. I know how to deal with them. After smiling and reassuring Kyre, then watching Kyre hurriedly fly away, Yunming Xian stood as she faced towards the north, watching the black dots come closer and closer. Xiao Shui, there's a very unfortunate piece of news. We've been exposed? That was the worst thing that could happen, but also the thing that was most likely as well. That's right. What's more, the people who found us are the Yin Huan Alliance. Long Tianyun also personally came. Yunming Xian spoke into her communication device. Li Xiaoshui fell silent for a while before replying. That worthless little fox must have smelt something. How many people did he bring? He probably came to scout this place out, so he only brought 1,000 or so people. Now that we've been found out, Long Tianyun definitely won't allow the construction of the city to go on. In order to take the city creation token, I wouldn't be surprised to see him mobilize the entire Yin Huan Alliance. Yunming Xian said pensively. You don't sound very worried, though, Li Xiaoshui replied with an interested look on her face. Yunming Xian gave a light laugh. Because you said that if this happened, you'll be able to contact Ling Tian. Hee hee, Li Xiaoshui laughed. The Yin Huan Alliance has tens of millions of players. If it was just protecting himself, I'm sure it would be impossible for them to kill him. However, even if he had 10,000 hands, he wouldn't be able to protect such a large city. Blindly worshipping someone isn't good, you know. However, no matter how desperate the situation, he'll be able to rescue it. No matter how impossible something is, he'll still be able to do it. That's the impression he has given me. He is the only person I am willing to blindly follow, Yunming Xian said as she smiled. All right, Li Xiaoshui said in a strange voice. I'll immediately contact Big Brother Ling Tian, who you blindly worship and will blindly follow. My Snow Moon Loulan will also immediately go over to defend the city. However, right now, you're the only person there. What are you going to do? After being blocked by winter of that year, there are only a few hundred people left. Long Tianyun won't use these few hundred people to do anything. I'm sure that after he has personally confirmed it, he will leave. In order to destroy this new city, he'll immediately have to return to make preparations, as opposed to wasting time here. After pausing, Yunming Xian continued, he'll probably gather more than 1 million people to attack, so as to destroy the new city in one fell swoop. According to my rough estimates, the earliest he'll be able to organize so many people will be around midnight, and at the latest, early morning tomorrow. The timeline Yunming Xian estimated was quite close to what Li Xiaoshui was also thinking. After hanging up, she thought for half a minute before picking up her phone and calling Chaoying and Chaoshi. She informed them of the situation and told them to tell Ling Tian immediately. She was certain that no matter what he was doing, he would immediately hurry back. The new city didn't just belong to Yunming Xian and Ling Chen. Li Xiaoshui had also bet quite a lot on this new city. As such, especially when the new city was about to be completed, she didn't want it all to go to waste, especially if the other side was the Yin Huang Alliance, who could cover the sky with one hand. Snow Moon Loulan needs to move out before planned, Li Xiaoshui muttered to herself, then sighed. It's just that secretly developing has limited its scale. We'll be like grasshoppers trying to stop a car. Ling Tian, we'll need you to show the might you displayed back in the East Ocean continent. You were able to destroy the top 3 guilds in the East Ocean continents. I don't see why you can't stop a single Yinhuan alliance. Speaking to there, Li Xiaoshui thought of the 2 times she had met with Ling Chen, and how they had communicated deeply on a physical and psychological level. She started to laugh lightly, and her anxiety slowly disappeared. After hanging up the call with Li Xiaoshui, the intruders were only a few hundred meters away from Yunming Xian. Most hunters were able to use high-level detection abilities at this range to discover who the new city belonged to. Yunming Xian calmly stood there, waiting for them to come closer. In actuality, she had long since made preparations for this day. From recruiting the fairy clan and the dwarf clan to the entire construction of the new city, everything had gone far too smoothly. As such, it wasn't strange that during the most important time, some problems would arise. Yunming Xian's gaze flitted around continuously. However, she didn't see Long Tian Yun among the players, who were coming closer and closer. Instead, the players who drew near all emanated bloodlust. It was as if they were spending all of their efforts in the running, and didn't plan to go back alive. Yunming Xian felt incredibly surprised, but the Yin Huang Alliance's players' hearts were all rapidly thumping. They had already confirmed that the city ahead of them belonged to a player, and were all completely shocked. None of them could believe this. To be able to construct something of such a scale, even if it went on day and night, would take at least 3 or 4 months. How was it possible that 3 or 4 months ago, someone had killed an incredibly high-grade boss and obtained the city creation token? Moreover, from what they saw, this was achievable only with great power and wealth. To achieve such a feat, it was definitely one of China's 10 biggest guilds. During the construction of a city, there were usually countless troops stationed there to defend the city. As such, a few hundred players rushing towards the city would be akin to suicide. However, by the time they had nearly reached the entrance of the city, they could only see a goddess-like woman standing there. As for the troops that they expected, there was no trace. Young master, we've confirmed that this place belongs to a player. This means that a faction has obtained the city creation token and is building a city here. This is something confirmed by all of the hunters and is definitely correct. Also, this city is incredibly large and spans nearly 2,000 square kilometers. If this city is completed, it will be the biggest city ever constructed in the virtual world. It'll be larger than the largest city our Yin Huan Alliance has constructed by more than 6 or 7 times. For something of this scale, the creator of this city must have poured in an astronomical amount of money for this land, labor, and resources. It's impossible to imagine who could have such a fortune. What's even more incomprehensible is that this city has remained a secret for so long. In the few months it would have taken to reach this point, they would have required more than 100,000 high-level builders. Even if they hired all of them, it's impossible for them to do it so quietly. Before today, no one has detected anything. If the creation of this city was made known to the public, it would send the entire world into a frenzy. We're already less than 300 meters from the boundary of this city, but we haven't seen any troops stationed to defend it yet. However, there seems to be a woman standing there. One of the leaders reported to Long Tianyun in an extremely shocked and excited voice. After continuing on forward, they still didn't see anyone, nor did anyone come out to stop them. The Yin Huang Alliance's players, who had been charging forward, gradually slowed down and gathered together as they looked at the solitary person, Yunming Xian. "This is my territory. Please leave immediately." The few hundred people faced off against a single woman who wore a white veil. She didn't give off any pressure at all. However, before they could say anything, a cool voice sounded out. If they were facing a beauty, with so many men present, they would have revealed mocking and lewd smiles. However, facing Yunming Xian, not a single one of them could smile. Instead, they tried to look away. The woman in front of them had her face covered and calmly stood there. However, she gave off an incredibly noble and regal aura. Although she was standing right in front of them, she emitted an aura as if she was standing on clouds, while they were buried in mud. They felt completely inferior, and as if they could not think any impure thoughts towards her. Hearing Yunming Xian speak, all of the Yin Huang Alliance's players looked at each other. The leader immediately came out and looked away as he asked, "Is this your territory? Are you the owner of this city? You can put it that way." Yunming Xian's tone remained cool and collected. She was sure that Long Tianyun would be here soon. "Don't you think that it's rude of you to intrude into my territory without seeking permission?" "Your territory?" The leader smirked as he chuckled. "Beauty, you should prepare yourself. Perhaps before this place was yours. However, within at most 3 days, it will belong to us." This sentence revealed just how domineering and ambitious the Yin Huang Alliance was. As the largest guild in the world, the Yin Huang Alliance was an unstoppable force. Even as a low-ranking leader, his self-confidence was immeasurable. He was completely certain that now that this city had been found by their Yin Huang Alliance, even if it was completed, the Yin Huang Alliance would still destroy it and take the city creation token. Ever since the Yin Huang Alliance had become a major power, the power to create cities had always been in their hands. Mystic Moon wouldn't be an exception to this. After speaking, the leader half raised his head and took a step forward. However, at that moment a cold wind suddenly blew past, causing him to involuntarily tremble, and his foot paused in midair. About 5 steps away, a gray shadow appeared. The gray shadow appeared far too quickly, and no one in the Yin Huang Alliance saw when it had appeared. They only saw a blur, after which the gray shadow appeared. The person was dressed extremely strangely. Nothing was exposed under the gray cloak, and even the hand holding the sword was wrapped with a gray cloth. The gray shadow stood there unmoving, looking like a statue. However, an incredible pressure emanated out from this person, making it seem as if even the air stopped flowing. "Sword! Sword Emperor!" The leader spoke in a shocked and trembling voice, and when he called out this name, the other Yin Huang Alliance players also realized who this gray-clothed person was. Their faces fell as their hearts almost stopped. They definitely wouldn't misrecognize this person. This was the Yin Huang Alliance's incredibly famous Sword Emperor, a legend among players. The Sword Emperor's position within the Yin Huang Alliance was lowered to only Long Tianyun. The Sword Emperor was an existence no one dared to offend, no one could defeat, and no one could get close to. Simply looking at the Sword Emperor made these people feel as if a wave of coldness had passed through their bodies. Anyone could dress up like this, but no one could give off the Sword Emperor's aura. Everyone in the entire Yin Huang Alliance knew that the Sword Emperor had turned traitor and left the Yin Huang Alliance. Seeing the Sword Emperor suddenly appear, the deep fear and respect they felt caused all of the players to retreat a few steps. The sword in the Sword Emperor's hand would have looked ordinary and unappealing in a normal player's hand. But in the Sword Emperor's hand, the light it gave off caused them to tremble in fear, and some of them didn't even dare to look at it. "Our Lord Sword Emperor," the leader called out with trembling lips. The Sword Emperor finally responded by lifting the sword and pointing it towards his face. The leader subconsciously took a step backward, and his face became incredibly pale. This was the first time in his life he had been pointed at with a sword by the Sword Emperor. Although the sword was evidently 5 steps away, he could feel it pressed against his heart. He did his best to calm himself down as he spoke with great difficulty. "Lord Sword Emperor, are you going to stop us?" Whoosh! Just as he spoke, the sword in the Sword Emperor's hand disappeared, while an icy light reflected in his eyes. She. The Sword Emperor did not move, but the sword seemed to have a life of its, as it flew out from the Sword Emperor's hand. It sped through the air like a comet, and in an instant, it had passed through more than 10 players. Even after they all fell and died, not a person cried out. They were completely unprepared and didn't even know how they had died. In fact, some hadn't even yet realized that they were dead. Swish! The sword suddenly flipped in the air and flew back towards the Sword Emperor. By the time it returned to her hand, another 10 or so players had been pierced. No matter if they were archers, swordsmen, shield bearers, or mages, they were all insta-killed. In just an instant, around 30 players from the Yin Huang Alliance had died. Only then did they realize what was happening. They all cried out in shock and fear, causing the scene to become chaotic. The Sword Emperor and the sword charged into their ranks. Wherever the gray shadow traveled, there would be 10 or so beautiful arcs of light. Wherever the light traveled, at least one player fell. Decimation, the name, Sword Emperor, was a synonym for legend within the Yin Huang Alliance. These Yin Huang Alliance members never thought that they would one day face the Sword Emperor, as they had neither the guts nor the qualifications. The Sword Emperor charged into the group of Yin Huang Alliance players, her sword as cold as steel and her heart as hard as iron. Wherever she traveled, an icy light would flash, and despite the battle being 1 against 100, her frigid bloodlust caused those around her to tremble. In the distance, Yunmeng Xian watched in shock. She was not unfamiliar with the Sword Emperor, and when the Sword Emperor had appeared, Yunmeng Xian's mind froze. She couldn't understand why the Sword Emperor, who had once been part of the Yin Huang Alliance, would appear here or why the Sword Emperor would help her. Yunmeng Xian was sure that she had never interacted with the Sword Emperor before. They had never even spoken. However, she thought to what Li Xiaoshui had told her in the past, that when Ling Tian charged into the Long family's residence by himself, Feng Xie, you had saved him, then cut off ties with the Long family and Xin Yuan family. No one knew why she did this. Could it be that the Sword Emperor was doing this for Ling Tian? Could this Sword Emperor, who had supposedly cut off her emotions, have some sort of special relationship with Ling Tian? Because players all started at the same point. Even players on the heaven rankings were not too much stronger than other players during the early stages. Against normal players, one-on-one, they would definitely win. Against 10 players, they might barely be able to win. They only became truly powerful after they completed their second profession upgrade, which was when it became possible for them to fight up to even 100 players alone. For the Sword Emperor, facing even 1,000 enemies was not impossible. From the very beginning, The Sword Emperor's name had hung at the top of the player level rankings and was the first person in China to complete their second profession upgrade. Back then, when she had fought with Ling Chen, she was already extremely powerful, and now she was hundreds of times more powerful. To these players, fighting against the Sword Emperor was simply a nightmare. The sword shot forward like a silver bolt of lightning. Wherever it passed, even the air, light, and space were affected, as if they were being devoured by the sword. Under the might of this sword, even the shield bearers, who had high HP and high defense, were insta-killed. The leader of these people knew how terrifying the Sword Emperor was, but never expected that the Sword Emperor could decimate hundreds of people in just a few seconds. The Sword Emperor was still quite far away from him, and yet the cold aura emanating from her caused his heart and body to violently tremble. The Sword Emperor's name weighed down on his heart like a heavy mountain. Although his side had hundreds of people, he felt as if they could not retaliate at all. He shook as he took 2 steps back and hoarsely yelled, "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" An order like this sounded simply angelic to the Yin Huang Alliance's players, who had fallen into complete fear and chaos. Not a single person hesitated as they turned and ran as fast as they could. She. The sounds of bodies being penetrated continuously sounded out as another 7 people were pierced through their chests. The pierced players stopped in their tracks, looking at their chests in disbelief, then fell to the ground. The sword flew in a beautiful and exaggerated arc, then instantly returned back to the Sword Emperor's hand. The Sword Emperor turned into a gray blur and began to give chase. Seeing that the Sword Emperor didn't stop after they started running away, and instead started chasing after them, the Yin Huang Alliance's players' faces fell, as they gritted their teeth and ran as quickly as possible. However, how could their speed compare to the Sword Emperor's? Whenever the sword slashed out, the Sword Emperor seemed like a silent death god. As the icy light flashed out, droves of players were executed without the ability to retaliate at all. The Sword Emperor flipped her palm, causing the sword to fly out again, stabbing through another 6 or 7 players. She. The sound of bodies being pierced continuously rang out. No matter how fast the Shadowless and Slayers ran, they simply couldn't outrun the Sword Emperor's sword, which was like a comet, and were all mercilessly slaughtered. They were all elites within the Yin Huang Alliance, but in front of the Sword Emperor, they were like ants. Under the Sword Emperor's sword, all that was left for them was death, and could not even think about retaliating. When Long Tianyun arrived, he immediately saw the Sword Emperor's massacre. The 700 or so players had been whittled down to less than 200 players, and the survivors were all desperately escaping, as they screamed in fear. Sword manipulation. Seeing the sword flying through the air, killing droves of players. Although Long Tianyun had heard about this from Song Yin, he still felt incomparably shocked. Not only was the sword incredibly fast, it was incredibly powerful and precise. The furthest it traveled from the Sword Emperor was more than 30 meters away. This sort of sword manipulation was not something someone could achieve upon barely mastering it. She was already incredibly proficient. When she had betrayed them, she didn't have this ability. At least, she had never revealed it before. And now, she was wielding it at such a frightening level. Even a genius who was difficult to find in 1,000 years couldn't do such a thing. Behind Long Tianyun, winter of that year, who had somewhat recovered, hurried over. Seeing this scene, his jaw dropped and his eyes bulged. Holy crap! From this person's attire, isn't this the Sword Emperor who the boss mentioned quite a few times? Is that person this powerful? They're cutting through hundreds of people like they're cutting through cabbage. With this sort of power, even if the boss used his special power, he might not be able to win. Wait, is this person also a man-made god? How could a normal human possess such a terrifying ability? The escaping Yin Huang Alliance players saw Long Tianyun and felt as if they had found a sliver of hope. They all rushed towards him because in this world, Long Tianyun was the only person who could command the Sword Emperor. Although the Sword Emperor had betrayed the Yin Huang Alliance, Long Tianyun was still the Sword Emperor's superior in the past. Surely the Sword Emperor wouldn't dare to do anything to him. "Young master, the Sword Emperor! The Sword Emperor's attacking us!" The leader rushed over to Long Tianyun as he spoke breathlessly. More and more people ran over to Long Tianyun in fright. Only then were they able to calm down a bit. Since Long Tianyun had arrived, tens of players had been killed. Long Tianyun frowned as he looked at the Sword Emperor, who was rapidly approaching. When she was 10 steps away, he took a step forward and said with a serious expression, "Stop right there!" Just as he spoke, Long Tianyun's pupils contracted. An icy glint shot closer and closer towards him. -29550. Chi, -29,550. Not only did the Sword Emperor disobey his command, but she even attacked him unhesitatingly. A look of deep disbelief appeared on Long Tianyun's face, and his eyes stared wide open, as he silently fell backward. The instant he fell, he also saw Yunming Xian. "Why, young master?" The Yin Huang Alliance's players were all dumbfounded. They never thought that the Sword Emperor would attack Long Tianyun, and she didn't even hesitate at all. The Sword Emperor didn't even give Long Tianyun another glance as if he was just a minor character. She didn't stop as she spun, sending her sword flying towards the Yin Huang Alliance players, who were still gaping in shock. Less than a minute later, the Sword Emperor finally stopped. There was not a single person around her still standing. All that remained were disappearing corpses. The sword flew back into the Sword Emperor's grasp. After turning her wrist, it disappeared, leaving behind only a single person wrapped in gray clothing. Yunming Xian had walked over during all of this and stood behind the Sword Emperor. Facing the Sword Emperor, who had once been number 1 on the heaven rankings and was a legend among Chinese players, and had just decimated hundreds of players, Yunming Xian was able to remain extremely calm. She cautiously said in a soft voice, "Big brother Sword Emperor, although I don't know why you helped, thank you." The Sword Emperor didn't reply and didn't even turn around to look at her, instead silently walking forward. After taking 3 steps, a shriek tore through the air and flew towards the Sword Emperor. Clang! The ear-splitting sound of metal hitting metal sounded out as the arrow that was about to hit the Sword Emperor spun away from her. The Sword Emperor still didn't turn around, but 30 meters away, Winter of that year's expression became serious as his face paled. The sword hovered right in front of his forehead, only a pinky finger's distance away from hitting him. Big brother! Don't overreact. This little brother was just too in awe of what you did, and wanted to have a small spar against you. As he spoke, cold sweat poured down his body, and he froze. After witnessing the Sword Emperor's power, he was itching to test out that strength. Rather, he decided to play with fire, and shot out a crippling feather arrow. The arrows he shot out were not to be taken lightly. The Flame Emperor couldn't even retaliate against such arrows. Just as the arrow was about to hit the Sword Emperor, he suddenly lost the connection that his mental energy had formed with the arrow, because that arrow had been sent flying by an incredibly strong power. Before he could react, the sword suddenly shot towards his head, and even he, who had far stronger mental energy than normal humans, couldn't react in time. He had taken quite a great fright, and if his mind wasn't so strong, he would have fallen to the ground in fear. Winter of that year was completely certain that if the Sword Emperor hadn't stopped the sword right there, he would have a massive hole in his head. Clang! The sword flew back to the Sword Emperor, who still did not turn around, and silently left. The speed at which the Sword Emperor walked didn't seem very fast, but in just a few moments, she was already quite far away. Very soon, she had completely disappeared. Phew! Winter of that year fell to the ground, his heart rapidly thumping. He was not a coward, and was someone who knew that he would die in a year, so there was nothing to be afraid of. However, for that sword to suddenly shoot right in front of his forehead without him being able to react, that was simply too terrifying. It had caused him to sweat many years' worth of a cold sweat. After putting away his bow, he muttered to himself, "I thought that a special ability obtained at the cost of one's lifespan would make one a god. Who would have thought there would be such a monster? Controlling a sword from a distance, and at such a speed that even I couldn't react in time. Even the boss would find it difficult to block my arrows. Did this guy eat a legendary Great Ashura golden pellet? Winter, are you all right?" Yunmeng Xian walked over, with an anxious expression. The Sword Emperor's appearance had resulted in the deaths of the Yin Huang Alliance's players, but would also cause Long Tian Yun to become furious, and for his next move to become even more savage. Although she trusted Ling Chen, she couldn't help but worry even more about the new city. "It's him!" Winter of that year finally stood up and spoke as he looked towards the direction the Sword Emperor had walked. Yunmeng Xian was a bit confused. "A month ago, I felt someone observing us. Although I felt it quite a few times, I always passed it off as me overthinking. I was overconfident and thought that no one could evade my senses. However, it seems that I was being too arrogant. This person deserves the title of Emperor, and is much more terrifying than the rumors make them out to be," Winter of that year said sincerely. This was the first time he had earnestly praised someone before in recent years. However, luckily, he's not an enemy. Otherwise, I definitely would have been insta-killed by him just now. Big Sister Goddess, I remember that the Sword Emperor should be part of the Yin Huang Alliance. Why would he suddenly help us? Plus, he's been here for at least a month and is evidently helping to protect the new city. The imminent crisis. Yunmeng Xian shook her head. "I don't know. It's the first time I've spoken to her." Although Yunmeng Xian was sure that the Sword Emperor had acted because of Ling Tian, she wasn't certain what the main reason was. "Oh," Winter of that year replied, then looked down as he said apologetically, "I'm sorry. I couldn't properly protect this place, and allowed the Yin Huang Alliance to find it. I... Yunmeng Xian smiled. "It's fine. If it wasn't for you and 100 miles of ice, the new city would have long since been discovered. I only feel eternal gratitude towards you both. For you to be able to protect the new city until today is already quite amazing, and I have no idea how to repay you. If the Ling Tian city is built, if you're willing to stay, I'll wholeheartedly welcome you both." The one who suffered the most from the new city being discovered was Yunmeng Xian. However, not being able to fulfill the promise made at the beginning of this endeavor, and being comforted by Yunmeng Xian, Winter of that year felt incredibly guilty. He gripped his fists tightly together, then opened them as his expression became vicious, and he said with great determination, "Big sister, don't worry. Although the boss and I are quite weak, if the Yin Huang Alliance attacks again, even if we die tens of times, we'll still stop them." He then scratched his head, feeling vexed as he said, "The boss left at such a bad time. If he was here, I forget it. With Long Tian Yun coming here, even if the boss killed them all, Long Tian Yun would have come back. Don't worry, as long as Ling Tian comes back, everything will be fine," Yunmeng Xian said as she smiled, her voice full of confidence. Hearing this, Winter of that year paused for a second, then looked at Yunmeng Xian before a look of sadness briefly appeared in his eyes, then disappeared. He grinned. "Ling Tian, I quite want to meet this legendary figure. Even the boss is quite interested in him." Bamboo Sea Wonderland. After receiving the news from Li Xiaoshui, Chao Ying, and she realized how serious the situation had become and immediately left the game. They went to where Ling Chen and Tian stayed and entered the hall. They saw Tian holding a large bowl, drinking some soup she had made and looking rather lonely. "Big Sister Ing, Big Sister Shi." Seeing them come in, Tian happily stood up. "Have you eaten lunch yet? I've got a lot of soup here. It's very yummy." "We've already eaten," Ing replied. She looked at the time. It was already 2 p.m. She walked over and asked, Tian, why are you only now eating lunch? Where's Master?" "I finished making lunch ages ago, but I couldn't wake Big Brother up from the game. I waited until now, but Big Brother still hasn't come out, so I decided to eat first by myself," Tian replied. Normally, Ling Chen would come out from the game to eat at the same time every day, but occasionally, because of some special circumstances such as important quests or fighting powerful bosses, he wouldn't be able to immediately leave the game at his normal time. As such, Tian was unconcerned. Tian knew that there was probably something important going on within the game, which was why Ling Chen couldn't come out. Shi and Ing looked at each other, then said to Tian, "Tian, you can continue to eat. We'll go take a look." They went to Ling Chen and Tian's room, and saw Ling Chen peacefully lying on the bed, his game bracelet activated. Since the situation was so urgent, they needed to wake him up at once. They stood on his left and right, and repeatedly called out to him. They told him about the danger the new city was in, but there was no reaction from him, nor did he exit the game. After about 15 minutes, Tian finished eating lunch and came over. Shi and Ing asked her worriedly, Tian, how long does Master usually remain like this?" Tian thought about it seriously. "I'm not sure. Sometimes it'll just be a bit longer. Sometimes it will be a lot longer. The longest time, he ate breakfast and only came out at midnight. Big Brother's probably doing a very dangerous quest at the moment. Big Brother said that for some quests if you leave halfway through, all of the progress would have been for naught. Big Brother will probably be done and come out soon though." The new city was facing the Yin Huang Alliance. Moreover, the new city's defensive capabilities were incredibly weak, let alone the Yin Huang Alliance. Even a moderately sized guild could destroy it. Their only hope was Ling Chen, who had decimated the 3 largest guilds in the East Ocean continent. The Yin Huang Alliance could attack the new city at any time, and the new city drew closer to danger every second. If Ling Chen did not come by the time the Yin Huang Alliance began attacking, then the consequences would be unimaginable, and the situation would be beyond hope. As such, they simply couldn't wait. Tian, today, you need to stay by Master's side. If Master comes out, you need to tell him that the new city has been discovered by the Yin Huang Alliance, and that he needs to immediately go and protect the new city," Ing said. "Oh? I've got it." Tian nodded in confusion. Although she didn't know what this new city was, seeing how anxious Ing and Shi looked, she knew that something big had happened. Ling Chen City. How could the fairies and dwarves not notice the ruckus that the Yin Huang Alliance's players had caused? When Yunmeng Xian returned, the 2 clans' leaders immediately went up to her. Greenwood frowned as he asked seriously, "Have we been discovered?" Yunmeng Xian nodded. "In the end, we were still discovered. Chief Dillo, how long will it take for the city to be completed if we work as fast as possible?" 3 days. 3 days will be enough. Great Moon Goddesses, please don't let anything happen to our new home," Chief Dillo said emotionally. During these few months, he had sufficiently understood the situation in the Forgotten Continent, as well as the factions in the human world. Moreover, he also understood what the consequences of this new city being discovered were. All of the dwarves were praying day and night for the new city not to be discovered. However, what they were most afraid of had already happened. 3 days. Yunmeng Xian repeated this in a low voice as she replied, Chief Dillo, please do your best to calm all of our dwarven friends down. Don't panic, no matter what. Put all of your efforts into completing the new city, and don't worry about anything else. I've got it! Don't worry, we dwarves have experienced so much and have suffered many hardships. How could we lose our composure over something small like this? Chief Dillo said resolutely. We're unable to interfere in the conflicts between you otherworlders. We'll have to rely on you to deal with this crisis. All we fairies can do is provide high-grade consumables, Greenwood calmly said. If there's anything else we can do, let us know. Yunmeng Xian nodded, then gave a relaxed smile. Cheese, please don't worry. Although we're unable to borrow your strength, I'm certain we'll be able to get through this crisis. After 3 days, the storm will have passed and the skies will be clear again. All of this is just a light drizzle to welcome the completion of the Ling Chen city. Although the fairies were powerful, they were unable to participate in the defense of the city. The heavy responsibility of protecting the city fell on Yunmeng Xian. As such, no matter how worried she felt, she had to look relaxed and confident in front of the fairy clan and dwarf clan. That's right, that's right. Chief Dillo became relaxed as well, as a look of gratitude and excitement appeared on his face. I'm sure our dwarf clan's great benefactor, little friend Ling Chen, will definitely come. He even defeated the guardian god, who has protected our dwarf clan for 10,000 years. I'm sure it will be incredibly easy for him to defeat these otherworld intruders. Greenwood laughed, nodding his agreement. He had personally witnessed Ling Chen's power before. Winter of that year, who still felt quite guilty, lowered his head as he stood behind Yunmeng Xian, not daring to say anything. Hearing Dillo and Greenwood mention Ling Chen, as well as their praise towards him, his eyes flashed. After looking at Yunmeng Xian, his desire to meet Ling Chen increased even more. This Ling Chen, what did he do to deserve the good graces of so many people? At that moment, Yunmeng Xian's communication device rang out. Yunmeng Xian looked at it and immediately picked it up. Li Xiaoshui's voice sounded out. Meng Xian, there's a piece of bad news. What is it? Yunmeng Xian's heart tightened. At such a critical time, the last words she wanted to hear were bad news. Ling Chen is currently in the game. He's been in there from early morning until now, but he hasn't come out. I told my 2 little sisters to call him, but he hasn't responded at all. Evidently, there are some special circumstances from which he can't extricate himself. You know that Ling Chen has cut off all communication within the game, so it's impossible for us to communicate with him from inside, Li Xiaoshui said solemnly, as she spoke with a heavy expression. You're saying? Every sentence Li Xiaoshui spoke, Yunmeng Xian's heart felt a bit heavier. Currently, Tian staying by Ling Tian's side. If Ling Chen comes out from the game, Tian will immediately tell him about the situation. However, I don't know when Ling Chen will come out from the game, nor does anyone else. It could be immediately, or in 1 or 2 hours, or 1 day or 2 days, or even longer. Yunmeng Xian, after deeply sighing, Li Xiaoshui continued, in this sort of situation, we can't bet on the best-case scenario, which is Ling Chen coming out of the game as soon as possible. This is because we can't afford to make such a bet. If we bet incorrectly, we will have wasted all of our blood, sweat, and tears, and we will have destroyed the city that the 2 clans place so much hope in. We must plan according to the worst-case scenario, which is that Ling Chen cannot make it at all. Hearing Li Xiaoshui's words, Yunmeng Xian felt as if thunder was booming in her ears. The new city had been discovered by the Yin Huang Alliance and was faced with the threat of destruction. Yunmeng Xian had been worried, but she didn't panic because she was completely confident that even against the Yin Huang Alliance, Ling Tian would be able to protect the new city. Ling Tian had become her mental support regarding the new city's crisis. If Ling Tian really didn't appear, this support would completely crumble. Editor, mind lit up. What happened? Seeing Yunmeng Xian's eyes become lifeless, Greenwood frowned as he asked caringly. Yunmeng Xian put down the communication device, and her stiff expression was replaced with a smile. Li Xiaoshui's news caused her heart to fall into disarray, but she couldn't panic. At least, on the surface she couldn't panic, because her emotions would also affect the fairies and the dwarves. Chief Greenwood, Chief Dillo, please rest assured that we will definitely get through this without any trouble. Chief Greenwood, I remember that your clan can use nature's energy to quickly grow vines. Is that possible here? And if so, how long can the vines remain for? Chief Greenwood seemed to understand what Yunmeng Xian was thinking. His eyes lit up as he nodded. This place is quite close to the fairy forest, so nature's energy is quite dense here. Although the efficacy can't compare to when we're within the fairy realm, it's definitely possible. The vines that we create will remain forever unless they're destroyed or we release them. For the current Otherworlders, the walls of vines put up by ordinary fairies will take them quite some time to destroy. Very well. Chief Greenwood, as well as all of the other fairy friends, please build a wall of vines that are at least 5 meters tall and 45 kilometers long at the north end of the new city. Of course, the longer it is, the better. Chief Greenwood, with all of the fairies helping, is it possible to do this before the end of today? Greenwood thought for a moment before solemnly nodding. It should be no problem. However, the west, east, and south, we won't be able to cover those. Yunmeng Xian shook her head. It's fine. It's more important that we protect the north. Before, even with the strength of the current players, it was only possible for a very small number of people to reach this place. However, for Long Tian Yun to bring so many people this last time, the only possibility is that they found a safe route from a town in the north to here. This sort of route is incredibly rare, and it's essentially impossible for them to find another one. As such, if they want to attack the city, they will need to first arrive at Little Peace Town, then go to the Azure Forest Village. If Long Tian Yun bought teleport scrolls from the Azure Forest Village, it's likely they'll directly teleport there. No matter where they attack from, they'll come from the north. If they try to attack from other directions, they'll need to pass through high-level monster territories, which might decimate their troops before they even arrive. Thus, we only need to protect the north. I'll immediately take the fairy clan to do this. Knowing how dire the situation was, Greenwood didn't dare to dally and quickly left. Chief Dillo, please tell all of the dwarf friends that your job is to complete the new city as soon as possible. These few days, please stay calm and put all of your efforts into building this city. Don't worry about anything else. No matter how fierce the battle outside is, or how desperate the situation seems, ignore it all. Even if the enemies have broken through our defenses and have rushed into the city standing right next to you, just ignore them. By doing your best to construct the city, all of you will be fighting an important fight. I understand. We dwarves will do our best to fight to protect our home. The heavens will protect all of us. Dillo spoke emotionally as he raised his hands high in the air. He then turned and rushed back into the new city while yelling, and personally joined the other dwarves in constructing the city. The fairies all gathered together, then split into 2 teams, which headed to the west and east. Even Kair was included among them. A 5-meter-tall, 1-meter-thick wall of vines sprouted out from the ground amidst green light, rapidly extending in an arc towards the north. By now, Yunmeng Xian had completely calmed down. She picked up her communication device as she called Yunfeng. Big brother, there's something I need your help with. Where are you? I'll talk to you face to face. After asking where Yunfeng was, Yunming Xian disappeared amidst a flash of white light, leaving behind the perplexed winter of that year. Seeing the wall of green vines rapidly extending, his jaw dropped as he scratched his head and stamped his feet. He heard some noise behind him as he suddenly turned around and saw 100 Miles of Ice, who had finally returned. His emotions burst out. "Boss, why did you take so long?" 100 Miles of Ice expressionlessly took a step back. He was already used to outbursts like this as he calmly replied, "Quest." 100 Miles of Ice's calmness made Winter of that year want to go crazy. He roared, "Something bad happened, you know. This place was discovered. And it was the Yin Huang Alliance, personally led by Long Tianyuan." 100 Miles of Ice's eyebrows jumped. Evidently, this piece of news affected even him greatly. Previously, he had stood guard with Winter of that year in front of the Azure Forest village because of Winter of that year. However, Winter of that year hadn't decided to leave after calming down. Instead, he had continued to stand guard. After a while, guarding the new city had become a duty he had set for himself. His reward was the satisfaction of seeing the new city grow day by day, as well as a faint sense of happiness. "Forget it. Boss, I can't really blame you for this. No one could have known that this would happen while you were away. I can only blame myself for being useless." Winter of that year sat on the ground as he powerlessly spoke and looked at the wall of vines. No one, including Yunming Xian, blamed Winter of that year. She felt only gratitude towards him, as well as that she owed him. The only person who felt guilty was Winter of that year, who put all of the blame on himself. "Boss, while I was still unconscious, you entered the virtual world and have many more years of experience than I do. You understand the Yin Huang Alliance more than I do, and you definitely know that the Yin Huang Alliance won't allow this city to exist. However, both of us know that the new city has practically no defenses. Only tens of thousands of dwarves and a few thousand fairies, but they're all NPCs. You told me that at its peak, the Yin Huang Alliance had tens of millions of players. How can this weak city survive?" He pointed in front of him. "With just this wall of vines? It's created by the powerful fairies, and a player would not be able to open a hole even in hours. However, facing hundreds of thousands, or even millions, of players, how long can it last?" 100 Miles of Ice silently sat down next to Winter of that year, his eyebrows still knit into a frown. Winter of that year continued to speak. "I wasn't able to keep the promise that I so boldly made. It was all because of me. As such, no matter what, I must take responsibility. I'll stay here and defend against the intruders. Even I can't stop them anymore, even if I have to use that ability." Hearing Winter of that year's words, the calm 100 Miles of Ice suddenly stood up as he stared at him. "Huh? You think I'm crazy, right? Or maybe that I've become incredibly stupid?" Winter of that year laughed self-mockingly. "I made a promise to someone who I had just met and stood guard here for a few months, using up what little of my lifespan I had left. I completely ruined my plan of traveling around the entire Mystic Moon, and I even dragged you in with me. And now, in order to make up for my failure, I'm willing to make myself turn into an idiot. Boss, you must think that I'm the most ridiculous person in the world, right?" 100 Miles of Ice. "Boss, have you ever met someone where the instant you saw her, you felt as if your body, soul, and even the whole world was melting? To the point that you couldn't feel yourself breathing or your own heartbeat. When she speaks, you believe there's nothing more beautiful in the world, or that her eyes are so beautiful that you don't dare to keep looking for fear of defiling them? A person who your soul tells you to give everything for them, despite not knowing who they are, or if they're a good person or bad person." 100 Miles of Ice. Winter of that year closed his eyes as he said softly, "I'm sure you haven't met such a person, or you would have acted even more stupid than I am now. However, I met such a person. My brain capacity is far greater than a normal person's, so perhaps that's why I reacted much stronger than most people would to such a thing. However, I've completely fallen for her. Before, I only used silly ways to flirt with pretty girls for fun. After all, I only have 1 year of lifespan left, so I want to have fun. However, I'm not playing around this time. Although I know I'm not good enough for her, and that she already has someone else within her heart, I don't care. Perhaps if I had a normal person's lifespan, I would do my best to chase after her. However, I don't have that sort of right. If she really fell for me, I would be overjoyed, but I would silently leave to a place where she could never find me so that she could forget about me. Ha ha. Of course, that's impossible. As such, I can rest easy. Boss, do you know how happy and blissful I feel to be able to see her every day and to help her? I feel that, apart from not being able to meet my parents again, there's nothing else that I regret in this life. 100 Miles of Ice slowly sat back down next to Winter of that year and remained silent. He had never met someone like what Winter of that year had just described. However, something that would never change was that he would protect this person next to him and never abandon him. Back then, during the intense explosion, Winter of that year had used his body to shield him, and had lost consciousness for 6 years as a result. He had walked along the boundary between life and death countless times. After Winter of that year finally woke up after those 6 years, how could 100 Miles of Ice abandon him? A dark world. Within the perfectly dark world, Ling Chen had no idea where he was going, nor did he know how much time had passed. He was pulled forward by the lunar scourge, unable to see anything at all. Where is this place? Where's the lunar scourge taking me? These two questions surfaced in Ling Chen's mind thousands of times. Desperate straits within the dark world, Ling Chen had no idea that already half a day had passed in the outside world, nor did he know how desperately he was needed. Although there were countless people calling for him and hoping for him to appear, he, who had been cut off from the rest of the world, definitely would not make it back in time. There were more and more players who had completed their second profession upgrade, and every day there would be countless more players rushing towards their second profession upgrade. As this happened, the date for the royal city to be unlocked came closer and closer. Many large guilds and families had long since made preparations to charge into the royal city as soon as it opened. During this period of time, where the focus was second profession upgrade and the royal city, extremely explosive news spread out among the Forgotten Continents players. What? Constructing a city? Almost complete? 2,000 square kilometers? And it's not the Yin Huan Alliance. Are you sure? Did you hear? Our China region city creation token was dropped ages ago. The new city is almost complete, and it's said that the city is to the south of the Azure Forest village. This has been completely verified. Moreover, it doesn't belong to the Yin Huan Alliance. If it was the Yin Huan Alliance, the entire world would have known about this by now. Why would they do it so secretively? Of course, I heard about it. Who doesn't know about this? This is something that was confirmed by the Yin Huan Alliance. It's definitely true. Holy crap, which big faction was so OP that they obtained a city creation token so early? However, now that they've been discovered by the Yin Huan Alliance, they're completely screwed. The Yin Huan Alliance will definitely go destroy it so that the city creation token will appear again, and then snatch over the city creation token. What? They haven't even finished constructing it? Fudge! Won't it just be like playing around for the Yin Huan Alliance then? If they can save this city, I'll run around the Forgotten Continent 3 times. Alliance Master. Big news! The city creation token has appeared, and the new city is about to be completed. It's to the south, and we don't know who it belongs to. President, we just received a shocking report. The city creation token you've been looking for has already been found. They're building a city south of the Azure Forest Village. All members pay heed. Each of the 5 halls are to assemble all players within 5 hours. Apart from those necessary to defend, our entire alliance will gather at our headquarters. This operation will affect our honor and future development, so no absences will be excused. To be able to construct a player city is my, as well as the entire alliance's, dream. We have the ability and power to construct a magnificent city, but we've never been able to obtain a city creation token. This is our biggest chance. We definitely can't let this opportunity slip by. Assemble the entire alliance. The city creation token has appeared, and we don't need to look for it. This time, the Yin Huang Alliance is determined to obtain it, as are many other factions. However, we still have a chance. We're going to fight for it honorably. Weaklings have no right to possess the city creation token. Brothers, assemble the entire alliance. How can we miss out on this battle? We're the truly powerful ones. Even if the Yin Huang Alliance snatches it before us, we'll take it from them. As the news about the new city spread, the entire virtual world almost exploded. In every country, the appearance of a city creation token caused a massive frenzy. This time, it created an even greater uproar because the new city did not belong to the Yin Huang Alliance. This made players feel incredibly shocked and excited, and it caused countless factions to go crazy because they saw the hope of stealing the city creation token. After talking to Yunmeng Xian and learning about the situation, Yunfeng froze, unable to speak for a while. He never would have thought that Yunmeng Xian had been acting mysterious, constantly disappearing over the past few months, because she was constructing a new city. The shock it brought to him was greater than even Mars hitting Earth. The words constructing a city were simply too dumbfounding. Hearing that the new city had been exposed less than 3 days away from completion, and that it was Long Tianyun who had discovered it, Yunfeng was horrified. He, of all people, knew what this meant. Just as his forehead began to rapidly sweat, his communication device started ringing. Because Yunmeng Xian was present, and he felt incredibly anxious, he didn't immediately pick it up. However, the communication device repeatedly rang out, forcing him to pick it up. Just as he was about to roar out in anger, he heard the report from the other side, causing his face to become ashen. What happened? Seeing Yunfeng's face, Yunmeng Xian felt that something was off. A very bad piece of news. Yunfeng gritted his teeth. If Yunmeng Xian hadn't told him that the new city belonged to her, hearing this news would have made him incredibly excited, and he would have gone to see the fun. However, now that he knew it was hers, this piece of information was incredibly terrible. Long Tianyun, so sinister and malicious. He spread the news about the new city. Yunfeng spoke somewhat hoarsely. This piece of news was simply too cruel to Yunmeng Xian, who was already so powerless. What? Yunmeng Xian felt as if she had been struck by lightning, and her body began to sway. Yunfeng gripped his fists together, the whites of his knuckles showing. According to normal logic, after discovering the new city, Long Tianyun should have suppressed this information, then secretly destroyed the new city to obtain the city creation token. With the Yin Huang Alliance's power, this should have been extremely easy. However, if this news was spread, other guilds and alliances would come to fight for the city creation token as well, hindering the Yin Huang Alliance. And yet, Long Tianyun has spread this news. Long Tianyun is not an idiot. The only reason he would do such a thing is because he knows of the relationship between you and the new city. Yunfeng became more and more emotional as he spoke, and his forehead beginning to drip in a cold sweat. More likely than not, he spread the news so that the ones who wanted to destroy the new city went from just the Yin Huang Alliance to countless factions, destroying any hope you have. This is partially revenge for you rejecting him and causing him to lose face. At the same time, he wants to force you to beg him for mercy, or to simply hand over the city creation token to him. Moreover, he wants you to know that despite there being so many people desiring the city creation token, he will still obtain it in the end. He wants to show his arrogance and might to you. He wants to tell you that you'll never be able to escape from within his palm. Ding! Ding! Yunming Xian's communication device rang, and Yunming Xian, who appeared to have spaced out, only picked it up after 3 seconds. Looking at the name, blowing clouds and flying snow, Yunming Xian quickly answered it. Chao Shui, Ling Tian, he still hasn't responded. Tian has been calling him the entire time. Li Xiaoshui's voice sounded quite helpless, and after pausing she gave a sigh as she spoke. Ming Xian, you probably know of that piece of bad news, right? Yunming Xian said as she nodded. Before, with just the Yin-Huan alliance, we were already in a hopeless situation. But now, even if Ling Tian appears, nothing will change. Ming Xian, tell me your plans, Li Xiaoshui said slowly. Her words were quite cruel, but they were the cold, hard truth. Plans. Yunming Xian's vision became a bit hazy. If Ling Tian didn't come, how would she defend the city? Perhaps the main defensive force would be Li Xiaoshui's Snow Moon Loulan, and maybe her big brother would also take the risk to help her. However, what else was there? With these meager forces, even defending against the Yin-Huan alliance alone was wishful thinking, let alone countless other forces. Trying to defend would simply result in the people who tried to help her losing everything. There was no other outcome. Moreover, with countless factions attacking, even if Ling Tian returned, he wouldn't be able to defend against all of them. Give up? At least if they didn't retaliate, they could prevent much death and great losses. However, Yunming Xian closed her eyes as countless scenes from the beginning of the new city, through the construction progress, flashed through her mind. She softly spoke. Ling Tian gave me the city creation token, but what he gave me wasn't just a token that contained countless people's dreams. It also contained hope for me, as well as the destroyed heart's dream. He not only left behind the city creation token, but also many other things, and described how he had met the fairy clan and dwarf clan. At that time, he had already made a plan, but he didn't tell me. Instead, he gave me these things because he wanted me to create Heart's Dream's future and hope myself. This was the first time in my life that I believed I could control my own fate. As such, I started to work hard and found you, the fairy clan, and the dwarf clan. I then went through the Forgotten Continent's history, as well as the rules related to building a city. Afterwards, I focused all of my time and effort into constructing the new city, and did not leave it day or night. If this new city was built, I would be able to finally have my own freedom. I could wait for Chi-Chi and Su-Su to come back, and witness an even greater and more glorious Heart's Dream. In order to not let their race go extinct, the fairy clan left the fairy realm and decided to build their new home in the human world. Every fairy has done its best, using all of the resources they had stockpiled to help the construction of the city to go faster. They even used mystical wood and mystic stones from the fairy realm. And the dwarf clan, Shao Shui, they've been working even harder. Every day, all of the dwarves are covered in sweat, but their smiles are incredibly jubilant. Even the elderly, whose hands and feet shake, and who use walking sticks, work every day and refuse to rest. Children who have just learned to walk look forward to growing up so they too can help out, because the new city is their hope and their future. If the new city was destroyed, do you know how cruel this would be to them? 2 streaks of tears slid down Yunming Xian's face. I will continue to protect the new city no matter what. Even if Ling Tian doesn't appear, I won't give up. Ling Tian once told us that no matter how desperate the situation seems or how difficult the task is, as long as we're still alive, we can't give up. Because if we don't give up, then a miracle might just happen. Li Xiaoshui gave a long sigh. I understand. Meng Xian, just like you, I will persist until the end. Snow Moon Loulan has 90,000 players in total, and all of them will arrive in front of the new city within 3 hours. That's all I can do. Also, not too long ago, the Skyfall dynasty broke off our partnership. However, even if we were still in a partnership, the Skyfall dynasty still would not help us. After all, they're one of the biggest contenders for the city creation token. I understand, Yun Meng Xian replied as she gently wiped the tears from her face. Meng Xian, you also have your big bro, Yun Feng said. Yun Meng Xian's words greatly moved him. She had put everything into this new city. If the new city was destroyed, it was possible that her entire world would shatter. Yun Feng grinned. I'm going all out this time. I'll bring the entire Disillusion Alliance within 6 hours. The Disillusion Alliance was a subsidiary guild of the Yan Huang Alliance. Yun Feng knew exactly what the consequences of this were, but at this moment in time, he couldn't care less. Even if it was akin to a grasshopper stopping a car, in order to protect his little sister's new city, he had to bet everything could. As such, he has to make sufficient preparations, and most likely will not make a move by today. If the Yan Huang Alliance does not make a move, neither will the other guilds, because the one who attacks first will become cannon fodder. During this period of time, it's likely for Ling Chen to return, and we can also search for other aid. That's right. Xiao Qiufeng can help us. The Battle Alliance was one of China's 10 biggest guilds, and it was larger than even the Disillusion Alliance and Snow Moon Loulan added together. Although it was a subsidiary guild of the Yan Huang Alliance, this was only in name, and they only possessed a relationship on the surface. In reality, the Battle Alliance was completely independent, and Xiao Qiufeng would not allow his Battle Alliance to become a true subsidiary. If the Battle Alliance was willing to stand on the side of the new city, they would be a great help. After sending off Yun Meng Xian, Yun Feng gave the order for the entire alliance to assemble within 2 hours, then hurriedly went to the Battle Alliance. He had been close friends with Xiao Qiufeng since they were young, and Yun Meng Xian was close with his little sister, Xiao Qi. The new city also contained some of Xiao Qi's hopes, so it wasn't impossible for Xiao Qiufeng to help protect the new city. After entering the Battle Alliance without any issues, Yun Feng quickly reached Xiao Qiufeng. Before he could speak, Xiao Qiufeng coldly spoke. If you come to ask me to help protect the new city, then don't waste your words. This one sentence forced back all of the words that Yun Feng had wanted to say. He paused in shock for a moment before replying. You already know that the new city is related to my little sister? Oh, your little sister? It wasn't Ling Chen? Xiao Qiufeng sounded quite surprised, but he calmly continued. It's said that the city is nearly completed, and taking into account its scale, it would have been in the works for at least 3 to 4 months. Only Ling Chen would be able to obtain a city creation token so early on. So Ling Chen gave the city creation token to your little sister. That's right. Yun Feng gritted his teeth. You should know that my little sister has essentially no defenses. For the new city to be exposed, she has no way to defend against such a large-scale attack. Even if my Disillusion Alliance goes, they'll be almost useless. What's even worse is that Ling Chen is missing, and we can't contact him. Xiao Qiufeng, you must help me with this. Tell me this first. If my Battle Alliance goes, what are the odds of successfully protecting the new city? Yun Feng moved his lips as his face became red, unable to say anything. The answer was quite obvious, as well as quite cruel. Unless some miracle happened, even if there were 10 battle alliances, they still would not be able to save the new city. Moreover, even if a miracle happened, it wouldn't be the Battle Alliance that would create it. And tell me, If my battle alliance goes, what are the consequences that we'll have to bear? Xiao Qiufeng continued. Yun Feng's throat went dry, unable to reply. Xiao Qiufeng continued to speak calmly. Countless factions want to obtain the city creation token. Anyone who has even a bit of confidence in obtaining the city creation token will be attacking. Even if there are not thousands of factions, there'll still be a few hundred, 100 at the very least. Anyone who dares to go will have a formidable force. Moreover, with the Yin Huang Alliance attacking with their full force, I don't think there's any faction in the world who could defend against them. If my battle alliance goes, the only result will be my people being completely annihilated. Protecting the new city is simply a joke. At most, we'll buy a bit more time, but we'll also receive retaliation from the Yin Huang Alliance after, and will be mocked and suppressed by the other guilds for a long time. Yun Feng, why would I sacrifice my guild for a new city that has nothing to do with me, and bear those consequences? I understand all of that. Yun Feng's voice sounded quite helpless. Xiao Qiufeng's words had clearly shown his position, but Yun Feng felt reluctant to give up. Xiao Qiufeng was the only support he could find. If even Xiao Qiufeng refused, then any other reinforcements would simply be wishful thinking. However, the new city doesn't just belong to my little sister, but also Ling Tian, and the entire Heartstream, which includes your little sister, Chi-Chi. Xiao Qiufeng. Heartstream was destroyed by the Yin Huang Alliance. After Ling Tian left, the girls also went their ways, so that they could become stronger and create a stronger Heartstream. This new city can be said to be the new Heartstream. Xiao Qiufeng, after your little sister returns, do you want her to see more hopelessness and destruction? As a man, there are things that you should do and things that you shouldn't do for my little sister. I would rather act recklessly and disregard the consequences. Moreover, without trying, how do you know what will happen? Perhaps the time that your battle alliance buys will be enough for Ling Tian to get back. Xiao Qiufeng deeply breathed in and tilted his head up as he coldly replied, Yun Feng, after knowing me for so many years, do you not know what sort of person I am? After I make a decision, I don't go back on it. Sorry for taking up your time. Yun Feng didn't waste any words as he turned and heavily walked away. Yun Feng's words sounded so heavy that Xiao Qiufeng's heart trembled. He walked forwards and raised his hand in the air, but then let it fall powerlessly as he watched Yun Feng walk further and further away. Yun Feng, please don't blame me. At least you have a little sister who can make you act recklessly so as to disregard any consequences. However, Chi-Chi has reached the point that doctors said would be the end of her life and still hasn't come out from within the game. I'm unable to eat or sleep properly, and I'm afraid that she'll pass away before she comes out of the game. I desperately want her to come back and for the miracle that she told me was about to happen to occur finally. I don't have any strength or mind to worry about anything else. All hall masters, heed my orders. Assemble all of your players as soon as possible and wait for further orders. After giving this order, Xiao Qiufeng left the game. Recently, he had spent most of his time outside of the game. Xiao Qi still hadn't returned from the game, and her time was nearly up. He had not been able to feel at peace for a while. North of the new city, a gigantic, 5-meter-tall, 1-meter-thick wall of vines was rapidly growing, and it extended as far as the eye could see. Not only did the wall of vines block the front of the new city, but it also blocked in front of the fairies and dwarves. 3 people stood in front of the wall of vines, Yun Meng Xian, winter of that year, and 100 miles of ice. At this moment, a snow-white shadow quickly approached from the distance and reached them in an instant. Seeing her name, winter of that year yelled out, Mu Bingyao. Wah! Are you the frozen-hearted man-eater on the heaven rankings? Big sister Bingyao, you're here. Yun Meng Xian walked over. She hadn't seen Mu Bingyao in a while, and seeing her now, she felt much more reassured. However, Mu Bingyao arriving didn't mean that the entire dark night had come. They were all death gods of the dark night, and were reapers who only obeyed Ling Chen's orders. They didn't fight in such open battles, being unsuited for large-scale battles. Moreover, without Ling Chen's orders, they wouldn't expose themselves. After Mu Bingyao arrived, a large crowd appeared behind her. The Snow Moon Loulan, with Li Xiaoshui personally leading them, had arrived even faster than Li Xiaoshui had said. 92,730 people in total, all female. I never thought that I would have to bring them out so early, Li Xiaoshui said as she casually waved her hand, and the players behind her fell in ranks. The age of the Snow Moon Loulan's players covered a great range. The youngest was around 13 or 14, and the oldest was around 40 or 50. The Snow Moon Loulan was publicly acknowledged to be the largest female guild in the world. At their peak, they had more than 500,000 players. However, in the Mystic Moon world, Li Xiaoshui had changed her focus from fighting to expanding financially. As such, the Snow Moon Loulan seemed to fall into stasis. They began developing secretly, and their scale was much smaller than in the past. The current Snow Moon Loulan contained the cream of the crop, and none of them were new. A guild of 90,000 players was by no means small, but in front of the Yin Huang Alliance, as well as all of the other factions, they seemed incredibly small and weak. Although they were all female players, they were all extraordinarily disciplined. After arriving, not a single one of them spoke, and they all had serious and determined looks on their faces. After standing in their ranks, they gave off a faint sense of bloodlust. Their equipment was all excellent and could make anyone drool. With the Li family's vast finances, how could the Snow Moon Loulan's players not possess the best equipment? Winter of that year looked around with wide eyes. 2 eyes were not enough with which for him to look at all of these beauties. It was the first time in his life that he had seen so many women. Winter of that year's respect for Li Xiaoshui skyrocketed to new levels. This little beauty was simply too amazing. She had built such a large guild, comprised entirely of women, and brought them all here. This was definitely the 8th wonder of the world. 2 hours later, another large wave of people arrived. This time, it was Yunfeng's Disillusion Alliance, who numbered 138,000 players. In total, there were 230,000 people. This was all of the defensive power they had. Although more than 200,000 people had arrived, it was incredibly quiet. The storm had not yet arrived, but the dark, foreboding clouds that hung at everyone's hearts gave off a suffocating feeling. Pure white Maiden time passed minute by minute, second by second, gradually approaching midnight. In front of them, everything was silent. Every 10 minutes, Yunfeng would ask the scouts to give reports as to whether the large guilds had made any moves. The Disillusion Alliance and Snow Moon Loulan's players continued to stand guard, and not a single person left. Their expressions were surprisingly similar. They were all incredibly calm, without any trace of fear or panic. This was not because they were all incredibly mentally stable, but because all of them knew the consequences of defending this place. Just a Yin Huang alliance was enough to decimate them completely, and there were other factions as well. Since the outcome had already been decided, what was there to be afraid of or nervous about? Players rarely appeared at the Azure Forest village, but countless players arrived there today. After seeing each other, none of them spoke, and all headed towards the same place. The item shop. The item shop usually had quite poor business, but the threshold was almost destroyed by players continuously stepping on it. They only bought one thing, which was the Azure Forest Village's teleport scrolls, which they bought in the thousands and 10,000. In a single day, over 10 million teleport scrolls were bought, making the proprietress of the item shop delirious with joy. As the clock struck midnight, the old day ended and a new day began. The people defending in front of the new city tensed, looking into the distance silently. Yun Meng Xian, Mu Bingyao, winter of that year, 100 miles of ice, Li Xiaoshui and Yun Feng. The 6 of them, 2 of whom were not battle professions, as well as 230,000 players from the Disillusion Alliance and Snow Moon Loulan, were the entirety of the defensive force for the new city. Within their hearts, they all waited for their only hope. Ling Tian. Tian stayed by Ling Chen's side the entire time, and Chao Ying and Chao Xing continuously checked up on whether Ling Chen had returned from the virtual world. Every now and then Li Xiaoshui would ask about Ling Chen's condition, but every time the answer would be the same: that Ling Chen still had not come out from within the game. Just like that, their hope began to die, bit by bit. Yun Feng's communication device suddenly started to ring, as did Li Xiaoshui's. As they simultaneously answered, they revealed the same expression. "They've finally come!" Yun Feng closed his communication device forcefully as he spoke in a low voice. His eyes became cold and alert as he yelled out, "Disillusion Alliance, heed my orders. Everyone advance by 300 steps, then assemble into battle formation within 3 minutes. Our Disillusion Alliance has been developing in a low-profile manner, and this is our first large-scale battle. Perhaps the battle will be incredibly fierce, and most of you will die. However, though we may be defeated, though we may be killed, we will never flee. Understood?" "Yes, sir." The sound of more than 100,000 people shouting together was quite deafening, and the entire Disillusion Alliance marched forwards, causing the ground to shake. When they stopped, they formed a perfect wing-like formation, protecting the new city and the Snow Moon Lulan's players behind them. Their task was to protect the new city as much as possible, but protecting women was something that was in every man's nature. As men, how could they allow women to encounter harm, though it was just a virtual game? All of their expressions revealed that they had completely accepted death as an inevitable outcome, and that the new city behind them was doomed to destruction. They all knew that their task today was to use their lives for a desperate final struggle. Nearly everyone within China's player base of around 1 billion knew where the new city was. Countless discussions were happening, and countless players were coming to watch the fun. And yet, there was only 230,000 standing guard. At this moment, it seemed like a tragedy to them. However, what they didn't know was that them defending the Ling Tian city was something that would bring them glory, something that they would boast of for the rest of their lives. "Big brother, how many people have the Yin Huan Alliance sent?" Yun Meng Xian calmly asked. It was definitely the Yin Huan Alliance who had acted first. If the Yin Huan Alliance didn't make a move, the other guilds wouldn't do anything either. "Around 2 million players," Li Xiaoshui replied. What? 2 million players?" Yun Meng Xian did not react, but Yun Feng's face fell as he yelled out. He had estimated that at most, the Yin Huan Alliance would send 1 million players. After all, 1 million players were already more than enough to completely destroy the new city. As such, he was completely shocked that Long Tian Yun would send out 2 million players. This number caused Yun Feng's vision to darken, taking away almost all hope. In the distance, the dust flew into the air as dark masses of dots suddenly started to approach from the distance, coming closer and closer. All of the defenders acted in unison, equipping their weapons almost simultaneously. "Big brother Xiaoshui, I'll leave this to you." Yun Meng Xian took 2 steps back and calmly smiled. A dark world. To stay in such a dark and silent place without anyone else around for such a long time felt like torture. If Ling Chen's mind wasn't so strong, he might have gone crazy already. Ling Chen lost track of how long he had been there, and he had continuously been dragged by the lunar scourge during that time. Step by step, as if he was looking for the boundary of this dark world. Finally, Ling Chen's eyes found a spot of light. The bit of light was very faint, and would have been undetectable to a normal human's eyes. After being in the darkness for so long, despite this light being so weak, it seemed incredibly bright in Ling Chen's eyes. That bit of light looked like a heavenly light to Ling Chen, causing his mind to become alert again as his heart rapidly thumped. Light! It's light! Ling Chen screamed inwardly, and his heavy footsteps became many times faster as he rushed towards the tiny bit of light. The place that the lunar scourge was dragging him to just so happened to be towards that light. As he quickly traveled towards it, the light became clearer and clearer, brighter and brighter. This caused Ling Chen to become delirious with joy. This meant that he wasn't just imagining things. Only someone who had spent so much time in darkness and isolation would understand how much joy that tiny bit of light could bring. As he came closer and closer to the light, he found that it was an orb of light, which had a hint of blue in it. It wasn't the blueness of the sky, nor was it the blueness of the ocean, but a mystical, dreamlike, light blue. The orb of light became larger and larger, and after half an hour, Ling Chen finally stood in front of this orb of blue light, looking at a strange scene. It was a light blue-colored crystal ball, and was about 1 meter in diameter. This was what was giving off the dreamlike blue light. It was the only source of light in this dark world, and because of the boundless darkness which devoured the light seemed extremely faint. There seemed to be a light blue mist swirling around within the crystal ball, making it difficult to see what was inside the crystal ball. Around the crystal ball, there were blue motes of light slowly floating around, which looked like fireflies. Some floated in front of Ling Chen, and he tried to grab them. When his fingers came into contact with them, they popped like bubbles and dissipated. The attractive force pulling the lunar scourge disappeared. Evidently, the lunar scourge was leading him here. Where was this place? "Chiyu, can you hear me?" There was still no response. During this entire trip, even if he hadn't called her 100 times, it would have been at least 80 times. However, she had not replied this entire time, as if she had completely fallen asleep. There was nowhere else to go and nothing else around, so Ling Chen could only walk towards this crystal ball. Standing in front of the crystal ball, countless motes of light sensed a disturbance and hurriedly cleared away. Ling Chen tried to see what was inside the crystal ball, but could only see that same mist. After hesitating for a moment, Ling Chen stretched out his hand and pressed it against the crystal ball. In that instant, the lunar scourge shot out a piercing silver light, which quickly covered the crystal ball and combined with its light blue light. The mist within the crystal ball started to spin rapidly, and at the same time, a wild attractive force dragged Ling Chen forwards before he could react. His 1.8-meter tall body somehow suddenly vanished within the crystal ball that was about 1 meter in diameter. Ah, what happened? The world in front of him had completely changed. When Ling Chen came back to his senses, he found that fog surrounded him. It was a completely different world. He remembered that he had been dragged towards the crystal ball and had ended up here. Could this be the world within the crystal ball? However, the crystal ball was so small, how could this space be so large? Could it be some sort of special magic or illusion? After looking around in surprise, Ling Chen found that apart from the blue mist, there was nothing else. He prepared to walk forward when his entire body suddenly trembled, his foot pausing in midair. His eyes widened as he dumbly stared in front of him. This world was completely different to the dark world outside. It was filled with a dreamlike, misty blue light. Above, it was pure white, as it was below, as if he was walking on pure, white clouds. In front of Ling Chen, there was a person peacefully lying on the ground. It was a small girl. From her body, she looked around 8 or 9 years old, and she lay curled up like a little kitten. She wore a thin, white dress, and her head was covered by her snow-white hair. Her skin was also completely white, but it was not a sickly white. It looked impossibly pure and flawless, to the point that people wouldn't dare to touch her. Her eyes were closed, her eyelashes quivered, and beneath them was her intricately shaped nose. This girl's entire body was pure white and looked completely flawless. She was too white and almost melted into this white world, making it difficult for him to see her and causing him to almost step on her. Shadissika, it was the first time Ling Chen had seen a girl like this before. White clothes, white hair, white skin, everything was a pure white color, to the point that his eyes were bewildered. Rather than a girl, Ling Chen was much more likely to believe that she was a fox demon. However, how could there be a girl here? Was she a creature of this strange world? Ling Chen slowly squatted down gently, for fear of waking up this pure white girl. Although he was quite close to her, he couldn't feel her breathing. All he could see was white. He could see any signs of life. Could it be that this girl was dead? At the end of the dark world, within a blue crystal orb, was a completely white girl in a completely white world. Ling Chen felt like he was in some sort of movie, because all of this seemed like more of a fantasy than a fantasy story. Ling Chen stretched out his hand towards the girl's face, wanting to see if she had any body temperature. As his finger touched the girl's face, a gentle warmth traveled from her face through his finger to his heart, making his body feel incredibly relaxed and pleasant. He couldn't understand how someone could possibly have such soft and supple skin. A human skin couldn't give off such a feeling. It felt like a jade sculpture that had been sculpted by nature over millions of years, and gradually weathered and nourished by nature's energy over millions of years. Just a simple touch caused Ling Chen's entire heart to tremble. He pulled his hand back and couldn't bear to touch her again. This girl was simply too pure and flawless, and he felt that touching her would be akin to defiling her, a type of blasphemy. At this moment, Ling Chen saw that the girl's long, white eyelashes suddenly moved. Although it was a very faint movement, Ling Chen saw it clearly. He wasn't sure what to do when her eyelids started to move as well, and her eyes slowly opened. Everything was completely white, and only her eyes were incredibly dark but bright. They became the most eye-catching things in this white world, and looked as stunning as the stars in the night sky. Ling Chen was completely dumbfounded. He, who was never at a loss as to what to do, felt like his mind went blank when this girl suddenly opened her eyes, rendering him soundless. The girl, whose eyes had just opened, noticed him immediately. Her body remained curled, but she raised her head, looking at the dazed Ling Chen. As the girl moved, a flowery fragrance wafted over, intoxicating Ling Chen. He watched as the girl gently raised her head, and he was able to see her face properly. Boom! Ling Chen's consciousness felt as if something had heavily hit it, and his mind went completely blank. Within this white world, he forgot to breathe and couldn't feel his heartbeat. He felt as if everything had been cut off. All that his eyes, heart, mind, and soul could see and feel was this incredibly beautiful and dreamlike face. There had never been a lack of beauties around Ling Chen. Shui Ruo was incomparably beautiful and, after being with her for so many years, his taste for beauty had reached new heights. These years, only a few girls and women had truly moved his heart with their beauty. Before today, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen was undoubtedly Qiyu. He had always believed that she was already the pinnacle of beauty, and that such a woman could only appear in the virtual world. It was impossible for such a beautiful demoness to appear in the real world. Yun Ming Xian was also magnificently beautiful, and was the only girl in the real world who could compare to Qiyu. However, the face in front of him. This girl, who looked less than 10 years old, completely crushed his preconceptions towards beauty. Qiyu's beauty was that of a seductive demoness and could cause him to blank out. It almost made him lose his self-control on some occasions. Yun Meng Xion's beauty was that of a goddess, and whenever he thought of her looks, he could only marvel in awe. And yet, this girl's beauty. The instant he saw her, he lost control of his mind, as if her beauty had stolen his soul. The beauty and intricacy of this girl's face made Ling Chen feel like there were no words for him to describe her. This was because no matter how elegant one's words were, they would be unable to capture her beauty fully. Instead, it would simply be an insult. If Chi Yu's beauty was such that it could not appear in the real world, then this girl's beauty was simply impossible and couldn't even be dreamed of. How could there be such a beautiful girl? Ling Chen shouted inwardly. He had never thought that he would have such a strong response because of someone's looks. Big brother, you've finally come to save me. The girl spoke in a tender voice, which sounded like it came from a heavenly waterfall. Her thin, white eyebrows were uplifted in delight as her dark eyes stared at Ling Chen. The girl was smiling, and her smile was one of the most beautiful scenes Ling Chen had seen in his life. Looking at her smiling, crescent eyes, Ling Chen's vision became hazy. His mind trembled as he started to fall into intoxication. He didn't even hear what she said clearly. Under Ling Chen's gaze, the girl started to uncurl her body as she pulled at her white clothing and lazily half sat up. Her expression still looked just as delighted. Big brother, can you tell me your name? Name? I'm called Ling Chen. Ling Chen had said this half unconsciously. After giving out his name, he seemed to realize something as his body trembled, and he wrestled back control of his mind, causing his head to become clear again. Looking at this girl, she still looked incomparably beautiful, but there were many questions within his heart. Who is this girl? This should be within that crystal ball, so what is she doing here? How could there be such a beautiful person in the world? She is so young, so when she grows up, who under the heavens would be able to resist a single smile from her? Her waking up caused me almost to lose control of myself, and when she saw me, she didn't look shocked or scared, instead, smiling at me happily as if I was her family. Ling Chen! What a strange name! The girl muttered to herself in a small voice before blinking a few times and saying clearly, All right, I'll call you Ling Chen in the future then. What about you? What's your name? Ling Chen calmed himself down as he asked his first question. I'm called. This was an incredibly simple question to anyone else, but the girl started to hesitate. After thinking for a while, her eyes lit up as she happily replied, That's right, my name's Shadissika. Is Ling Chen going to remember it? Dis-si-ka. What a strange name. Ling Chen repeated it a few times and committed it to memory as he asked in a gentle voice, Shadissika, is this really your name? Of course it's my name. Is there something wrong with it? The girl looked quite confused. The girl's face was incredibly white and tender, and Ling Chen felt like he wanted to touch and kiss it. Just suppressing this desire was incredibly difficult. Facing her question, Ling Chen hurriedly replied, Of course not. Then how about I call you Sha? Shadissika is a bit long. The girl nodded unhesitatingly. Sha, of course you can. As long as Ling Chen likes it, you can call me whatever you want. For him to meet her in such a strange place, Ling Chen was very wary toward this girl, and yet she spoke so affectionately with him. She seemed to like saying his name a lot, and whenever she said the words, Ling Chen, her eyes would always light up as if she was truly delighted to say this name. All right, Sha. Can you tell me what this place is? And why you're hiding in here? Ling Chen asked as he averted his gaze from her eyes. He was afraid that if he stared for too long, he would simply lose his mind. In response to Ling Chen's question, a look of confusion once again appeared in the girl's eyes. She looked around her, then looked back at Ling Chen as she suddenly smiled and replied, No idea. No idea? Then, where's your home? Where are your parents? And who brought you here? Ling Chen asked. After this barrage of questions, the girl still looked quite confused, and she smiled. I don't think I know the answer to any of those questions either. This girl was simply too pure and flawless, and doubting that she was telling the truth almost seemed like a sin. A word appeared in Ling Chen's mind: amnesia. This was within the crystal ball, and a person wouldn't just appear here. They were either brought in by some sort of power or person. Could it be that this girl had lost her memories after being brought in here? However, she remembered her name. Then do you know? Can you tell me? Ling Chen had wanted to gain some knowledge about this strange space, then find some way to escape. However, it seemed that this plan wasn't going to work out. The girl thought earnestly, then gave an angelic smile as she replied, I know my name, and that. I knew that you would come to save me. Save you? Ling Chen was quite shocked. How did you know that I would come to save you? The girl's smile disappeared as she looked at Ling Chen in shock. Could it be that you didn't come here to save me,